Day to protest corruption within the Putin government. 500 protesters were arrested nationwide, including opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who was accused of encouraging violence, despite there being very little violence to speak of. Navalny called the protests after he unearthed information tying Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev to ownership of a range of luxury properties across Russia that Navalny said he should not have been able to acquire via his modest government salary. Asked about the protests, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov seemed to reveal the government's true issue with the demonstrations, that it doesn't like attention on the corruption issue, telling the media in a statement that, quote, "What we saw yesterday in several places, probably especially in Moscow, is a provocation and a lie." Navalny says he will run for president in 2018, a contest in which he's likely to face off with Vladimir Putin. And the U.S. military has admitted culpability for an airstrike in Iraq that some say has killed as many as 200 civilians, though the Pentagon says it will need several weeks to conduct a full investigation. The March 17th airstrike in West Mosul targeted an Islamic State truck packed with explosives. According to Iraqi media, when the truck was hit, it exploded and destroyed two surrounding homes, which were packed with civilians. If confirmed, the civilian deaths from March 17th alone would nearly double the official civilian death count by the U.S. of around 200, going back to the start of Operation Inherent Resolve in June 2014. That figure is far lower than some outside estimates. The journalism project Air Wars believes as many as 2,700 civilians have been killed by coalition airstrikes, a figure more than 13 times higher than the U.S. estimate. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from ADHD and the Edison Gene, a drug-free approach to managing the unique qualities of your child. A relatively new book by me. This is from the introduction. I was in India in 1993 to help manage a community for orphans and blind children on behalf of a German charity. During the monsoon season, the week of the big Hyderabad earthquake, I took an all-day train ride almost all the way across the subcontinent, from Bombay through Hyderabad to Rajahmundry, to visit an obscure town near the Bay of Bengal. In the train compartment with me were several Indian businessmen and a physician, and we had plenty of time to talk as the country flew by from sunrise to sunset. Curious about how they viewed our children diagnosed as having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, I asked, "Are you familiar with those types of people who seem to crave stimulation, yet have a hard time staying with any one focus for a period of time? They may hop from career to career and sometimes even from relationship to relationship, never seeming to settle into one job or into a life with one person, but the whole time they remain creative, incredibly creative and inventive." "Ah, we know this type well," one of the men said, the other three nodding in agreement. "Well, what do you call this personality type?" I asked them. "Very holy," he said. "These are old souls near the end of their karmic cycle." Again, the other three nodded agreement, perhaps a bit more vigorously in response to my startled look. "Old souls?" I questioned, thinking that a very odd description for those who American psychiatrists have diagnosed as having a particular disorder. "Oh, yes," the physician said. "In our religion, we believe that the purpose of reincarnation is to eventually free oneself from worldly entanglement and desire. In each lifetime, we experience certain lessons, and finally we are free of this earth and can merge into the oneness of God. When a soul is very close to the end of those thousands of incarnations, he must take a few lifetimes to do many, many things, to clean up all the little threads left over from his previous lifetimes." Another businessman added, "This is a man very close to being enlightened. We have great respect for such individuals, although their lives may be difficult." Another businessman raised a finger and interjected, "But it is through the difficulties of such lives the souls are purified." The others nodded agreement. I said, "In America, they consider this behavior indicative of a psychiatric disorder." All three looked startled and then laughed. "In America, you consider our most holy men, our yogis and swamis, to be crazy people as well," said the physician, with a touch of sadness in his voice. "So it is with different cultures. We live in different worlds. We in the Western world have such holy and nearly enlightened people among us, and we say they must be mad. But as we're about to see, they may be interested, they may instead be our most creative individual, our most extraordinary thinkers, our most brilliant inventors and pioneers.
The Thom
children
Hartmann
among
Program
us
is
who are
brought to you in
teachers and
part by the
psychiatrists,
Aiden
they are
Forecast, an
disordered.
investment newsletter with
They
weekly
may,
updates
they
of
may in
leading
fact
market
carry
indicators and a
set
monthly
of
deep dive
abilities,
into what the
skill
details of the
set
economy and the
that was
markets mean
necessary
for
for the
investors and
survival of
retirees.
humankind in the
On the web
past.
at
It has created much of what we presently treasure as our quality of life, and that will be critical to the survival of the human race in the future. There is immense power in how we choose to view what's happening around us. And this is terrifically important when we consider how we can best know our children
the Thom Hartmann
and
Program
provide them with the upbringing they need, an upbringing that will lead them to be healthy, happy, functioning adults.
Non-GMO beets.
The premise of this book
and
is that children who have
nitrates,
what we have come to know as ADHD
for more energy,
are important
stamina,
and vital gifts to our
for
society
blood
and
pressure
culture,
levels,
and in the largest sense can be an extraordinary gift to the world. In addition, for those adults who have been similarly diagnosed or defined, this book offers a new way of understanding themselves and their relationship to the world, a way that brings insight, empowerment, and success.
Welcome back. It is
the long history of the human race, as we'll see in this book, has been conferred on us, some more than others, has conferred on us, some more than others, a set of predilections, temperaments, and abilities carried through the medium of our genetic makeup. These skills are ideally suited to life in the ever-changing world of our ancient ancestors, and we have now discovered are also ideally suited to the quickly changing modern world of cyberspace and widespread ecological and political crises that require rapid response.
Need your help today. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now and make a contribution. We really need to keep this network going. There's a lot of great programming on this network. It's here because of you. It's here for you. So please step up if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you so much. I mean, we've been doing this for a little over 2 weeks, and a lot of people have called in and made a lot of contributions, and that is absolutely wonderful. Your support is so important. It's important to this show. It's important to Free Speech TV. It's important to the entire network. And frankly, it's important to democracy in America. Without Free Speech TV, without an independent voice, you know, there's just giant holes in our coverage. While all the networks, well, the cable networks anyway, I haven't watched the ABC, CBS, NBC News in years, but CNN and MSNBC, for example, yesterday the House voted to sell your Social Security numbers, your private internet browsing history, all that kind of stuff, to give your internet service provider the right to completely sell that stuff to anybody. This was the vote that they took in the House. It was entirely a party line vote in both the House and the Senate. All the Democrats voted against it, all the Republicans.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And today, for the hour, Congressman Mark Pocan is on the line with us, and he will be taking your calls on pretty much anything you'd like to talk about. Our telephone number, 202-808-9925. Congressman, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
Great to have you with us. I should add, your website is Pocan, POCAN.house.gov, and you can tweet Congressman Pocan at Rep, as in representative, Rep Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N. Congressman, when I was 13 years old, my best friend, Chuck, he was 2 years older than me. His dad was a professional magician. And Chuck and his dad taught us magic, and I was inducted into Ring 54 of the Lansing Guild of Magicians. And I did the Bozo show and a bunch of other things. And I was browsing around YouTube the other day and saw these clips of you doing magic tricks to explain politics. I thought, that's so cool. So I just wanted to share that with you. I was so impressed. Are you still doing those?
I'll tell you, I do the magic videos every other week on Mondays. We call it Magic Mondays. But I help pay for college doing magic shows. I was doing it since I was 8. And it's just, something a little fun. And so a couple of weeks ago, we had a magic trick explaining Trump Care, how, it basically, I was a rich person and my volunteer was someone needed health care. In the end, I got the tax break, I got their health care, they got nothing. So, it's a good way to try to make things a little more illustrated, and I still enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I thought it was a hoot. It was absolutely great. So what are the things that are at the top of your mind, calendar, schedule, what you're seeing around you in the House of Representatives and the Senate for that matter? What would you like to get into today?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, this week is a little bit of what I'd refer to, I guess, as a hangover week from last week with the failure of Trump Care. When we just talked a week ago, who would have thought all the things happened in those next couple days? And we just had Secretary Price in front of my Appropriations Subcommittee, the Labor, Human Services, Education Subcommittee. And, he's still not answering a lot of questions. I even asked him, I go, so in your opinion, why did it fail last week? Was it because, as the president tweeted out, the Democrats didn't vote for it, even though you never reached out to us? Was it because of the Tea Party, because the president tweeted that out? Was it because 17% of the public supports it? And, he enjoyed the question but didn't answer it. And I think, we're still trying to see what their next step is. Originally, they said they weren't going to move, but now clearly they're doing a lot of meetings to still try to figure out a way to repeal the Affordable Care Act, despite enormous public opposition. Tom, I get a lot of contacts because I have a very, very politically involved district in Wisconsin, Madison being the largest city in it. But we had something like 7,300 people tell us they opposed Trump Care, and only 54 people who supported it. And most people, offices had several thousand against, and a double-digit number for. But it was a huge amount of people who didn't want to go that direction. So I think that's been the big issue. And the other odd story that just keeps unfolding is this Representative Devin Nunes, who is the head of the House Intelligence Committee, who now is telling us he got the intelligence about that maybe there was some kind of wiretapping or listening in on the president. He admits now he got it from the White House grounds, where one night he all of a sudden jumped out of his car and his staff didn't know where he was at. And that's where he got the info. Now he's telling us he'll never, ever tell us who he got it from. But then he, the next day, gave the information to the White House. So it's just a bizarre story unfolding. I'm not sure if this is a guy just looking to, maybe get a job in the Trump administration, although apparently he already has one.
Yeah, apparently. Well, there's an added twist to that just came up, just went up a few hours ago. This is Terry Connolly writing over at Huffington Post, and he notes that absolutely everything that Devin Nunes has said was said 2 days earlier in a front cover article in the National Enquirer. So if he hopped out of the car at the White House and somebody merely handed him the National Enquirer and said, here you go, here's the intelligence, he literally had everything that he has said in public so far. Could it be the National Enquirer is informing the House Intelligence Committee?
That's part of why we think he should recuse himself from any investigation in this. I mean, not only is he proved to be a hyper-partisan when it comes to this issue, but, we really, if the White House truly has no collusion with the Russian interference in our elections, then they should want an independent commission to look at this as well, because it's in their best interest. But the fact that we're still having this kind of, strange story unfold, and this is an especially strange chapter, Yeah. It's just been an interesting development this week, since the week's been relatively quiet on other new fronts.
Yeah, well, hopefully this will amp up the calls for an independent commission, a 9/11 style commission, because we need to find out what the hell's going on, and we need to do it without politics. The Internet Privacy Bill, this blew my mind. This legislation that essentially says that your ISP can take your entire browsing history, which these days is basically the inside of our brains, right? You're worried about some disease you think you might have, you Google it, right? You're whatever. All the embarrassing things in our lives, all the financial transactions in our lives. I mean, this literally includes Social Security numbers that your ISPs can now sell to anybody they choose to. Including your Snoopy next door neighbor or your boss or what. I realize not a single Democrat in either the House or the Senate voted for this. It passed entirely on the Republicans, and it's now going to Trump for his signature. I'm guessing you think he'll sign it. What are your thoughts on this?
This is one of those classic issues. Again, they never ran on saying this. I mean, I think the 99.999% of people want their ISP provider to provide uninterrupted service, right? That's all they want. They don't expect that you're going to take the searches you do via their service and then somehow be able to sell them to someone else to try to sell you products or whatever. I mean, it can be used in a lot of different ways that can be pretty scary. So I think that, we led strong opposition, Democrats, Progressive Caucus. We were out there with a statement very early. Keith Ellison was especially articulate, I think, in pushing this as an issue. And the Republicans, they really had no defense. They kept saying, oh, these things won't happen. They try to avoid the question when in reality, you're going to be open to a lot of ads, including your emails. They're going to know what because that's all through your ISP provider. So potentially they're even delving into the information in your emails, not just your internet searches. So it's very, very intrusive, and people should really reach out now that it's gone through the House and the Senate to the White House if they want to try to see it stopped. But I don't know if Donald Trump will do that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there will be some conspicuous fails, although I'm guessing at least for the first year or so, these companies will keep their heads down and, just do it on the QT. Bad stuff. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. He's the first vice chair of the House Progressive the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Back with your calls right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with your calls for Congressman Pocan. This full hour right after this. And welcome back. Joyce, watching Free Speech TV on the DirecTV satellite in Deer Lodge, Montana. Joyce, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
This
Joyce?
is unbelievable. Wait a minute. Let me take this off speakerphone.
Okay. Thank you, Joyce.
I want to ask Congressman Pocan about, there is no talk about Marco Rubio and the bill he got passed about the risk corridors, where compensate increases for their losses as part of the Patent Protection and Affordable Care Act.
Right.
So my question is, as a result of that, where insurers were being paid for their losses by the government in offering policies for the Affordable Care Act, nobody talks about that.
So your question is, why is it that when on the network news or whatever, when some Republican says, or even some news reporter says, Obamacare is imploding, nobody points out that Rubio and the Republicans set that implosion in place? I'm assuming, Joyce. Congressman?
Yeah, and there's no question that was one of the biggest poison pills that was put in there, intended to make it fail. And it does get talked about. The problem is if mainstream media doesn't pick it up, you don't know that it gets talked about. And that's a problem that I have, that I often explain to people back home. We're kind of at what the media takes from the arguments we have. But clearly, the imploding factor could be taken care of relatively easy by changing things like the risk corridor provisions. There's some of how do you make people make sure that they have health insurance who should have signed up and didn't, and other minor fixes can make it an extremely strong program. And I would argue a public option would even be one that would make it even stronger, because it would really solve some of the issue of the insurance companies that are staying in. So we talk about it, Joyce, and I appreciate about it. Our biggest problem is if they decide that what they like to, too often on the nightly news at the major networks, what they like to report on is the fight, right? One person says this, one person says this, and they like to cover, you'd think there's 20, 25 members of Congress by what they cover, and they don't take in a lot of voices. But I can assure you that members of Congress have pointed out this is one of the major issues. That's why we need to fix and not get rid of the Affordable Care Act.
I have started to print these things out. I'm on the mailing list for the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and 3 times this week I got emails, I believe, Well, it's only Wednesday. It might have just been twice so far this week. I've gotten emails from you guys saying, we're holding a press conference. And, with a list of the members of Congress who were there. And I never see any of those press conferences on CNN or MSNBC. Or, I don't watch Fox. How often do they pick you guys up, and how frustrating is it that they don't? We've got about 20 seconds.
Yeah, I'll tell you, last Thursday we had one, and our major theme was about the $600 billion in tax cuts to the wealthiest and to insurance companies and big pharma. That was probably the real reason why this bill was going forward, because there was no health care in the so-called health care bill. And yet, even though we had some people streaming it and some organizations we're working with, there was zero coverage from the mainstream media on it, and that's one of the major points of the bill.
Yeah, and this is a real problem with our media. It's infotainment rather than news. If it bleeds, it leads, and you've almost got to come up with bizarre theater in order to get covered. It's incredible. Congressman Pocan, we'll be right back with more calls for you. Thank you. Stick around.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day,
every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us
raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. And Nader in San Rafael, California. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I had a question for the congressman. As a result of Trump being in the White House and out here in California, the frustration, the environment, your privacy, health care, all the stuff that's going on, there is a movement in California called so-called Cal Exit, and they're actually gathering signatures to get on the ballot and ask the voters if they want to exit from the union. I just want to know if there is a legal avenue here, and what would that look like? And because, this could end up, we don't want to have a civil war, but what is a constitutional avenue, a legal avenue to get as far away from Washington as possible? Because in California, really, most people are on the opposite end of the political spectrum compared to where Trump has taken us. So just your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, Nader, thanks for your call. I come from the school of thought that you don't wave the white flag, which is what I think you'd be doing if you said California wanted to leave the country. I'd rather California fight hard. We know that your state can do a lot of good in helping to put legal challenges forward if the Trump administration and the Republicans pass bad provisions. My former colleague Javier Becerra, now being the Attorney General in California, was a member of the Progressive Caucus, a strong progressive. I'm looking forward to him doing legal challenges with the support of your state government to stop things for the rest of the country. At the same time, you can continue to do progressive policy in your local communities in your state that can be examples for all of us once we get through this nightmare, which I hope is 2018, if not sooner, if something else occurs where Donald Trump isn't in the White House. So don't wave the white flag. I understand why people get frustrated, but we need California to do a lot of the things that are going to be helpful for the entire country, and progressives really are going to rely on the work that your state government and local governments are doing.
Larry in Union Grove, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, how you doing, Larry?
Hi, good. Larry Zamba here. Hey, got a question for you, Mark. Give us some hope. Are you going to run for governor?
Larry, appreciate the question, but we're going to have multiple candidates, I think, back in Wisconsin. Scott Walker, who desperately wanted to be president and still wants to be president, or whatever high-ranking, dominant
emperor.
Position.
He wants to be emperor.
He love emperor, but they just haven't asked for his application yet. He is up in 2018, and he's never gotten above 45% support in the polls since all his presidential runs. And I think, he's in a good position to lose in Wisconsin. If we can get a Democrat elected as governor, it's right before redistricting. We know how important all that is around the country. But we need to stop some of the bleeding that he's caused in our state. We have the fourth worst roads in the country, about dead last in entrepreneurship, lowest job growth in the Midwest. Schools are losing a third of teachers in a given year. We have some schools that are doing that because of the policies he's done affecting teachers and how you fund schools. We got a lot of bad stuff happening in a state that was the home of Fighting Bob LaFollette and Gaylord Nelson and a lot of other really strong progressives, Russ Feingold, and of course our own Tammy Baldwin. So Larry, we're going to have a candidate. I'm very fortunate to have recently got on Appropriations Committee. I've, to get on one of the exclusive committees and to be in leadership of the Progressive Caucus. I love the fight I'm doing, and I want to continue doing it. But we got to take Wisconsin back, and we're going to need everyone who turned out at those rallies the day after inauguration to be active in the political process in order to see that happen.
Amen. And Congressman, keep doing this show, and instead of asking you to run for governor, they'll be asking you to run for president. I've seen it happen. Max in Napa, California. Hey, Max, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes. I was wondering, do you think that the reason that the Republicans still want to try to pass some sort of health care plan is because Bernie Sanders is going to introduce a single-payer plan soon? And I just want to say...
Whoa! I'm sorry. I just dropped Max. Max, my apologies. Congressman, your thoughts on Bernie's single-payer?
Sure. It's a plan that obviously I'm supportive of. A lot of us are supportive of. We think that this debate has opened up that debate again. But the reason that they're still at it is because they really want to give a tax break to the wealthiest in this country, and they really want to change to make healthcare decisions back in the hands of insurance companies because they don't believe that individuals should have that as a right. So as they keep that fight up, we're going to keep talking about things like single payer, Medicare for all. The public option is one of the ways to enhance the Affordable Care Act, but they certainly don't do themselves any favors when their proposal had 17% support, and Paul Ryan, who supposedly is a policy wonk, instead had a big thud last week with a big failure of Trump care. But they're going to keep pushing. When I asked Secretary Price today, he wouldn't answer the question because they're going to keep pushing something. And the only way they can get it passed through the Tea Party is to make it even worse, if that's possible. So maybe they're going for single-digit support before they pass it.
We have a little less than a minute till the break, so I'm going to preempt my callers because there's really not time to put one on right now. Although we'll pick them up on the other side of the break. But there has been some talk, and it seems to me it's just fantasy football kind of stuff. But who knows? That Donald Trump supported single payer back in the 80s and 90s. He knows what it is. That if he were to go to the Democrats and say, okay, screw this stuff, let's do single payer. I want to be as popular as Tommy Douglas is in Canada. I want to be the most beloved man in America. And I can peel off 30 or 40 Republicans in the House and 2 or 3 senators from the Republicans. And if I can get all the Democrats, we can do this thing. Any possibility at all, or is that just total crazy talk?
I think that's a great wishful thinking, but I think he cares these days more about the members of Mar-a-Lago loving him than he does about the American people, because clearly with all his appointments and the things he's been pushing have been not showing any indication that he really had a populist streak. What we're finding is he's really been a far-right nationalist populist in that sense, and that's what we...
So much for my fantasy football. Okay, Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Congressman right after this. Stick around. Oh, by the way, you can reach Congressman Pocan's website at pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
More of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan
right after this. Welcome back. It is the middle of our fundraising drive, the last week, the final week. Yesterday, we replayed Monday's request, pitch, whatever you call it, because I was at the dentist's office until about 5 minutes before I went on the air. My apologies. Apparently, that was a big mistake because we only raised $4,000 yesterday. We are now $6,000 behind our goal, and which is $10,000 a day, and we really need your help today. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now and make a contribution. We really need to keep this network going. There's a lot of great programming on this network. It's here because of you. It's here for you. So please step up if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you so much. I mean, we've been doing this for a little over 2 weeks, and a lot of people have called in and made a lot of contributions, and that is absolutely wonderful. Your support is so important. It's important to this show. It's important to Free Speech TV. It's important to the entire network. And frankly, it's important to democracy in America. Without Free Speech TV, without an independent voice, you know, there's just giant holes in our coverage. While all the networks, well, the cable networks anyway, I haven't watched the ABC, CBS, NBC News in years, but CNN and MSNBC, for example, yesterday the House voted to sell your Social Security numbers, your private internet browsing history, all that kind of stuff, to give your internet service provider the right to completely sell that stuff to anybody. This was the vote that they took in the House. It was entirely a party line vote in both the House and the Senate. All the Democrats voted against it. All the Republicans voted in favor of it. And it passed both the House and the Senate, and it's going to Donald Trump's desk for his signature. And if it becomes law, none of us are safe from the predations of these giant internet service providers. Now, why is it that MSNBC chose to spend all day talking about Russia and not 5 minutes talking about the fact that the Republicans were selling the internet down the tubes? Could it have something to do with the fact that MSNBC is owned by Comcast, which is going to be the largest beneficiary of this legislation? Could it be that CNN is owned by Time Warner, which is merging with AT&T, which would be the second largest beneficiary of this legislation? I think so. And you're not going to hear the actual news on these networks when it conflicts with their interests. They take millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising money from big pharma and from big oil and big coal. And guess what? No discussion on these television networks about global climate change, about the impact of these products, about how we're literally daily being ripped off by big pharma. No discussion of any of it. They don't want to offend their advertisers. So between their advertisers and their owners, we don't just have a media problem in this country. We've got a billionaire problem. We've got an oligarch problem. We've got a monopoly problem. Giant monopolistic companies and the oligarchs who own and control them are defining what kind of political dialogue we can have in the United States in our mass media. That's not democracy. That's not even news. That's blatant self-promotion by billionaires and giant corporations that have us by the neck. We need an alternative to that. I mean, even NPR this morning, which, you know, more often than not doesn't cover a lot of these stories because they're taking a lot of advertising dollars from these folks too. Even NPR this morning, at least here in Washington, D.C., I turned it on at 6 o'clock this morning when the cat woke me up. And what were they playing? The hearings from yesterday in the House, where people were talking about, the Democrats were getting up and saying the Republicans want Comcast to be able to sell your personal browsing history to anybody who wants it. And that's a bad thing. And, one little news outlet out of zillions covered that one story, but they're not going to cover, a lot of these other. It's just Free Speech TV is so important. And it doesn't exist without your help. With a $60 gift, you get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of the Thom Hartmann Reader. It's a collection of, each chapter is from a different one of my books, so it's a great introduction to my writing if you want to give if somebody's birthday's coming up or holidays, you know, I guess Easter's coming up. Traditionally, we don't give books for Easter, but you always can. Whatever. It's a great introduction to my writing. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $150 gift, you get the book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, the Free Speech TV grocery bag, the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get you get the Thom Hartmann Reader book, you get the Free Speech TV grocery bag, you get the Free Speech TV hat, you get the Free Speech TV hand fan, and the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. And you and maybe a few other folks, but, you know, we typically keep these fairly small. And, you know, whether it's pizza or there's a Thai restaurant, Ethiopian restaurant, there's all kinds of great places nearby. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Your support is needed now. Thank you so much for helping. So anyhow, there's just all these amazing Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us is Congressman Mark Pocan, who is the first vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. And let's see here, Cindy in Nogales, Arizona. Cindy, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for taking my calls. I wanted to express something about this wall. They're always on the Mexican wall. As I live out in the country, 2 miles from the border, they are always saying that this wall's going to protect us and all this idiot bullshit.
Ooh, Cindy, I'm sorry, you can't say that word on the air, so I've got to drop your call and flag you for the future. And my apologies. Did it make it through? Oh, good. We blocked it. We blocked it for our commercial stations. Anyhow, Congressman, your thoughts on the wall, on this idiot wall that Cindy was talking about?
I think that one word did the best job to define it that I've.
Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't hear it because we got this obscenity delay. We could delete it, but yeah, or not unfortunately, but.
Well, you know, they've actually had people come into hearings with already plans of what it might look like and how, and I've just heard some of this week about the whole proposal. They're really moving forward on this, and this is going to be, you know, hugely expensive at a time that, you know, we're cutting back on Meals on Wheels and Pell Grants and the National Institute for Health. So, you know, when it comes to appropriations, which I'm happy to serve on, we're going to do everything we can to fight any funds going towards it. But I know the Republicans are very unified around this issue.
Okay. Jeff in Moses Lake, Washington. Jeff, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thanks for having me. I just had a statement and then a quick question. Nunez said incidental collection, quote, no illegalities, quote, unmasked names and nothing to do with Russia, quotes. So from what I understand of why names get unmasked, you can only conclude that there's another whole investigation into Trump and his transition team that has nothing to do with Russia. And has anybody asked Nunez if his name was unmasked?
If his name, because he was part of the transition team. Congressman?
Yeah, I haven't heard that second part on it. But, you know, everything about this story is just bizarre, right? I mean, generally, the intelligence community, up until, of course, the age of Trump, has been pretty nonpartisan. They try to, you know, really make a habit of working together. And that's why when he started, you know, operating like he did and exchanging information without sharing it with the committee, you know, he really lost that committee's ability to do a fair investigation of this. But now we're into, you know, like National Enquirer land, right? I mean, this is where, he's getting information on the grounds of the White House, but not from, he's not going to tell us who from. And the next day he went and presented it to the White House. I mean, he was already on the grounds. I mean, none of it makes sense. It's this whole bizarre story, and he keeps digging that hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And, he really has to recuse himself from anything. And this is one more reason why that independent commission has to occur to get to the bottom of all this stuff. But I got the feeling that the way this guy's been behaving the last couple of weeks, there's a lot more of Devin Nunes for all of us.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're right. Becky in Valparaiso, Indiana, if I'm saying the town right, Becky?
Yes, you are. That's right. Hi. Yes, I just wanted to ask Congressman Pocan. I'm enjoying the dysfunction of the Republicans and Donald Trump, and if we were so lucky as to get him impeached, that would be great. However, how do you think we would fare much better under Mike Pence?
I'll tell you, I don't think that's a decision we necessarily have to make. I mean, if we have a president who's done something wrong that's impeachable, we have to impeach him. I don't care if it's a Democrat or a Republican. That's what we have to do for our country. And if that means Mike Pence comes in, he's certainly very, very conservative, especially on social issues. And as a openly gay person here in Congress, there probably wasn't a more anti-equality governor in the country than Mike Pence. There's a lot of reasons to have concern. But if a president has done something impeachable, we absolutely have to impeach that president. And if this president had collusion with the Russians during the campaign and they interfered with our elections, certainly that would fall, I think, under every definition of what's impeachable. That's why we got to get to the bottom of this. And if he's being unfairly characterized by that, then the independent commission will come out and say that. But we need to have that step to make sure we know what's happening. So I don't think it's as simple as saying, gee, I'd rather not have Mike Pence either. If it may be that many people within the Trump administration knew what was going on. That's why we needed an independent commission to figure it out.
Right. Jeff in Grants Pass, Oregon. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thanks for taking the call. My point is, you've been talking about these evil, bills that the Republicans passed in the Senate, and it was on party lines, but why didn't the Democrats resist and filibuster these bills?
Like the telecom thing. That was 50 to 48.
Yeah, Jeff, I can't tell you on the Senate, being in the House, why on that issue they didn't go there. I know that part of it is they're trying to deal with this whole issue around Gorsuch and trying to build support to make sure that they can try to hold a filibuster. And I don't know if they have all their members on board with that right now. But, we fought hard in the House. And, I think as you look at a lot of issues moving forward, we're trying to make sure that not only are we fighting the bad things that are getting introduced, but also we're proposing positive alternatives, because I think we have to make a case to the American people why this current group of people in charge aren't doing them any favors. So, in a couple weeks, I think it might be right after we get back from the April break, the Progressive Caucus will release our version of a budget. And I think that's something that, again, that's that really positive statement of our values. A budget is where you put your money is really what you believe, not all the rhetoric that happens in the Beltway of Washington. And, we're going to have a $2 trillion infrastructure package. We move towards states having single payer plans. We cut dollars that go to defense and increase money that goes to programs that help real people. We make college more affordable. Go down the list. I think those are the balance that we have. So I can't speak specifically to a Senate action or inaction, but I can tell you in general where progressives are at here in Congress, we're going to fight like heck where we have to fight, but we're also going to propose positive alternatives because I think that's absolutely essential.
And you can't say hell on the air. You can't say that other word that what's her name said. McWayne in Chino Valley, Arizona. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. I was wondering if you knew how Nunes voted on yesterday's privacy bill. He seemed so disillusioned with the alleged inadvertent collection of T-Rumps data, but was he willing to sell our data for the profit of his donors?
Yeah, he voted for it, I believe, as the vast majority of Republicans. I think there might have been a couple that voted against it, but he did vote for it. But you're right. I mean, they've tried to take this entire debate away from who might have interfered in our elections and who knew about it and might have been complicit during that actions to hey, someone's leaking information in the White House. We have to go after those who are leaking it, which I think, is a really interesting conversation. It's, if you're 5 years old and, you steal a cookie out of the cookie jar, instead of finding out, if you stole a cookie, you want to find out who leaked the information. It's a really interesting response they have rather than dealing with the big issue. So, no, I think they were hypocrites yesterday, and yet they'll go back on it when they need to conveniently to use that as an excuse.
Congressman, just an FYI, there's a GoFundMe page now, gofundme.com/BuyCongressData. And they say, Congress recently voted to strip Americans of their privacy rights, SJR 34, blah, blah, blah. And they say this GoFundMe page will pay to purchase the data of every congressperson who voted for SJR 34 and make it publicly available. No, we won't dox people. We won't share public information that will impact the safety and security of their families, such as personal addresses. However, all other details are fair game. It says so right in the resolution that they voted to approve. Game on, Congress. And they've already raised, this site has been up for 21 hours, and they've raised $16,900.
That's great.
It's hysterical.
I want to know if Devin Nunes has a subscription to the National Enquirer.
There you go. Or if somebody at the White House does, and they just kind of met him on the lawn and handed it to him. Scott,
they do. They do.
Yeah, there you go. Scott in Canaan, Maine. Hey, Scott, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Tom. I just had a question, the same one I asked last time. I talked to you a couple of weeks ago. You can't give these people a chance to catch their breath because they'll be back with the same bill under a different name. Why, again, isn't somebody, where's Bernie? Why isn't he out screaming on TV or on the floor for single payer or Medicare for all? Everybody's already paying for it. It's an existing program. Why hasn't there been a bill put in front of it so the American people can at least see that something like that is being done, and let us have the choice, run it side by side?
Thank you, Scott.
Obamacare got sabotaged because he gave it to the insurance companies to implement.
Scott, actually, there is legislation. Congressman?
Yeah, so Scott, but you bring up a good point, is that if the mainstream media aren't covering it, you're not finding out about it in Maine. And that's part of the problem we're facing. So there is a bill introduced that Bernie Sanders has. Bernie's fighting like hell, I can say, now the show, as are the members of the Progressive Caucus and people like Elizabeth Warren and Tammy Baldwin and Al Franken and many others. So, that is part of the alternatives that we're trying to put out there. But also understand that with this Congress and president, those bills aren't going to pass, but we're putting them out there to show the public that there is a better alternative than what they're recommending, that they're recommending you lose your health care, which is ridiculous. That's why we're able to put that out there and continue to build the support for it. So it is happening, but part of the problem with the mainstream media, they're not covering it.
We're talking with Congressman Mark Pocan. He's taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. You can reach him at, his website is pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep, R-E-P, as in representative, Rep Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this. And welcome back. Jim in Phoenix, Arizona. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you for taking my call, Tom.
Sure. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Yeah. So, I'm a 62-year-old white guy, and I understand everybody should get involved, and all my friends are registered. But as we learned from this last election, that popular vote doesn't really count. And with the redistricting, one of the things I think needs to be done, and maybe the congressman can point me to, the right direction, because I'd like to get involved. But if your name is Tyrone Washington, you might be taken off the rolls by some Secretary of State in one of these battleground states. And that seems to me that they're taking away your constitutional rights without due process. So why hasn't there been an organization, whether it's a 501c or can it be a political PAC, that actually raises money and files lawsuits in these battleground states to begin with to challenge the constitutionality of taking people off the rolls without due process.
Well, so Jim, thank you for your call and raising the issue of interstate cross-check. I know we've talked about on this program many times. In fact, right now we are trying to draft a bill to specifically address it for the future anyway, trying to figure out, working with some of our agencies, and we're looking for advice. So if people have it, please feel free to send to us, making sure that it's a first, middle, and last name along with a date of birth and a social security number. If they all don't match, you can't throw a person off. That would make sense, because right now if you're John Smith and there's another John Smith in a completely different state, even if your name is John Mortimer Smith and the other person was John Allen Smith, they're going to throw you off the way they've been operating with this interstate cross-check debacle. So it's intentionally done to what they want to do, right? Fewer voters help Republicans, and that's part of the intention, especially with a lot of Latino names that have a lot of overlap that we've seen with this. So we're trying to figure a way to try to look at proactively. We certainly have raised the issue. I think there are groups that are talking about this, because I've certainly heard about it, but it's part of that broader issue of voter suppression, right? Whether it's photo ID requirements, ending early voting, taking names off the ballot, making it harder for people to vote, making it so felons can't vote even when they've been cleared and off paper. There's a lot of challenges out there we've got to try to fight.
Yeah. We let's see. Let's try a quick one here. Ted in Soledad, California. We have a minute to the break. Ted, you got a real quick question for the congressman?
Yeah, kind of a quick one. Wisconsin is like a microcosm of the country. Unfortunately, California is not, because but Wisconsin has 40% of the people that vote for Scott Walker, who's very clearly destroying the state. How do we deal with these self-destructive, incidentally, blowing more carbon into the atmosphere? All the scientific evidence is that's destroyed. We have suicidal people, 40% of the population.
Right. So, Ted, let's let the congressman answer.
Get them to start taking care of themselves.
Yeah. No, Ted, I want to get his answer in here. Thanks.
Sure, Ted, I think part of the problem is when I look at the last election, we had 200,000 fewer voters in Wisconsin. We used to have probably the second highest turnout in the country, and this time we had the second biggest drop-off outside of Mississippi in the country. And, I would argue that talking to voters matters, and talking about core economic issues, what people talk about at their kitchen table. Can they afford their mortgage? Can they send their kids to college? Can they take a vacation? I don't think we did a good job of that last November from the very top of the ticket, and that's why we had a drop-off. But
weren't there a couple 100,000 people purged in Wisconsin?
Not quite that many, but the margin was 22,000. There was more than that margin.
Okay. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls right after this. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with you, taking your calls. Dan in Marion, Wisconsin, listening on Sirius XM. Dan, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning. Thank you. Hi, Mark. I have a quick comment and then a question. And the comment is, when Trump was running for president, he ran on a couple things, and jobs. The health care push failed. But now we're hearing nothing but...
Dan, your phone is breaking up really badly. I don't know if you can do something about that right away, because I can't hear anything right now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my point was Republican...
Dan, I'm sorry, your phone just broke up and we lost you again. Call back and, or maybe next week. Larry in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Larry, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Thanks for listening to 1350 AM.
Yes, I'd like to ask, as a member of Congress and your colleagues, I'd like to explain to us what exactly, what kind of health insurance do you guys in Congress have? Do you guys go through the exchange, and who pays the premium on your health insurance? And I'll wait for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah. Larry, great question, because this is one that the right-wing conspiracy sites, somehow if I'm served for a year, I get pension for my life at my salary. People think that's not true. And everyone thinks we have they say you should be on the Affordable Care Act if you're going to vote for it. Well, by law, we are the only people in the country that are mandated to be on the Affordable Care Act are members of Congress. That's part of a provision that happened when the law was passed. And I'll tell you, I've had absolutely no problems whatsoever. In fact, the biggest change I noticed when I flipped over from the federal plan to the Affordable Care Act was when I went to pay for my prescription drugs the first time. I didn't have to pay a dime. So actually, I improved the system from what I had. We all pay a little bit towards that, just like most employers have. But we're the only people in the country mandated to have the Affordable Care Act, and it works perfectly.
Dewana in Warner Robins, Georgia. Dewana, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello. My name is Bawana Sanders, and I want to talk about the health bill. My son passed away a year ago today, and he was trying to get health care. He went to many doctors. He went to the emergency room 7 times, and they would only go so far with him. And I have a suspicion it was because he didn't have health care.
Health insurance, yeah. So your question for the congressman?
Yes. I just wonder if they know how many people have died or are dying because they don't have health insurance.
Great question. Thank you, Dewana.
Yeah, Dewana, I don't have that number at the tip of my tongue, but we absolutely have that number. First of all, I'm very sorry for your loss. And, that's a story that happens all too often, not just if people die because they don't have health care, but people who are living that could have a much better quality of life, but they don't have health care. In fact, I've heard stories just this week of people who, because of the lifetime cap that used to exist, that literally they would have to decide on what they're going to take care of that's wrong with them. In this case of someone I talked to, they have incontinence they couldn't address. So, you could address something and make their life better, but because of an arbitrary decision by an insurance company, it wasn't addressed. That's why we need to consider it a right, make sure that absolutely every person has access to it. And until we get to that point, the Affordable Care Act made sure that 20 more million people have access to health insurance. And now things like pre-existing conditions and lifetime caps are issues that have some universal acceptance. So I'm sorry again for the loss of your son, but we're working on this to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And, thanks for your consideration.
And I think Harvard University said before Obamacare, the number was 45,000 people a year we were losing as a result of a lack of health insurance. And I've heard it's 17,000 now, but I could be wrong. Anyhow, Linda in Deerfield Beach, Florida, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thank you for taking my call, Congressman. My question is, how can we protect pensions in this country? I've already had one stolen, and I had a coworker that we worked at the same place. He had that pension stolen with me at United Parcel Service, and now at Boca Regional Hospital, he had his other pension taken, and we're both 57 years old. What can we do about this? And I'll take your question off the air. Thank you.
And we have 2 minutes until the end of the show, Congressman.
Yeah, Linda, I'm going to
answer
the
end of the hour.
The only fair way would be give a very long answer, but this is a crisis in this country. Part of when we did the fiduciary rule for people who are investing for retirement, some stats came out that I wasn't aware of, because someone mentioned the average person with $200,000 in retirement. Well, that average person is 1 out of every 8 people. Half the people live off of Social Security in the home they have. About a third of the people just live on Social Security, and that's not enough to live on. My mom, the small amount she gets doesn't cover the bills that she has, and she's 88 years old. We need to do more to make sure that people have pension protections, and unfortunately, they've been slipping away, especially with the attacks on unions. Those are part of the benefits that a lot of people had. So it's a much bigger crisis that needs a lot to have it addressed. And, we've got people with pensions who are losing what they've put in their entire life and expected to have. And I can't give you the 2-minute answer other than we need to make sure that we put a lot more attention to savings and pensions and retirement.
Yeah. Wasn't part of the problem that during the Reagan era, they changed so that corporations had to book pensions, could book pensions as assets. They always had to book them as liabilities before that, which inflated the value of the companies. And that's when Carl Icahn came in and took over TWA to get to grab their pensions, if I'm remembering correctly. I may be wrong on the details on that.
I think something like that was one piece of it. Another piece was as you attack the Central States pension fund that a lot of Teamsters have, UPS, there was an issue, and people there now are getting, on average, 40 to 60% less than they were supposed to get, which is,
Wow.
Can you working all your life, investing in that, and now you don't have what you need at the time. You can't make additional dollars. But also, a lot of people don't have plans offered at work, period, anymore. And we've got to figure out how to have something more portable to follow people around. So we've been working on this along with some other issues, the future of work and labor, with a few of us in the Progressive Caucus and actually outside of it. So a lot more needs to be done.
Yeah. We have a big lift here, and thank you for being part of doing that lift. Congressman Mark Pocan, pocan.house.gov, tweet at Rep Mark Pocan, M-A-R-K, Pocan. Congressman, thank you so much. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.
Welcome back. It is the middle of our fundraising drive, the last week, the final week. Yesterday, we replayed Monday's request, pitch, whatever you call it, because I was at the dentist's office until about 5 minutes before I went on the air. My apologies. Apparently, that was a big mistake because we only raised $4,000 yesterday. We are now $6,000 behind our goal, and which is $10,000 a day, and we really need your help today. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now and make a contribution. We really need to keep this network going. There's a lot of great programming on this network. It's here because of you. It's here for you. So please step up if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you so much. I mean, we've been doing this for a little over 2 weeks, and a lot of people have called in and made a lot of contributions, and that is absolutely wonderful. Your support is so important. It's important to this show. It's important to Free Speech TV. It's important to the entire network. And frankly, it's important to democracy in America. Without Free Speech TV, without an independent voice, you know, there's just giant holes in our coverage. While all the networks, the cable networks anyway, I haven't watched the ABC, CBS, NBC News in years, but CNN and MSNBC, for example, yesterday the House voted to sell your Social Security numbers, your private internet browsing history, all that kind of stuff, to give your internet service provider the right to completely sell that stuff to anybody. This was the vote that they took in the House. It was entirely a party line vote in both the House and the Senate. All the Democrats voted against it. All the Republicans voted in favor of it. And it passed both the House and the Senate, and it's going to Donald Trump's desk for his signature. And if it becomes law, none of us are safe from the predations of these giant internet service providers. Now, why is it that MSNBC chose to spend all day talking about Russia and not 5 minutes talking about the fact that the Republicans were selling the internet down the tubes? Could it have something to do with the fact that MSNBC is owned by Comcast, which is going to be the largest beneficiary of this legislation? Could it be that CNN is owned by Time Warner, which is merging with AT&T, which would be the second largest beneficiary of this legislation? I think so. And you're not going to hear the actual news on these networks when it conflicts with their interests. They take millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising money from big pharma and from big oil and big coal. And guess what? No discussion on these television networks about global climate change, about the impact of these products, about how we're literally daily being ripped off by big pharma. No discussion of any of it. They don't want to offend their advertisers. So between their advertisers and their owners, we don't just have a media problem in this country. We've got a billionaire problem. We've got an oligarch problem. We've got a monopoly problem. Giant monopolistic companies and the oligarchs who own and control them are defining what kind of political dialogue we can have in the United States in our mass media. That's not democracy. That's not even news. That's blatant self-promotion by billionaires and giant corporations that have us by the neck. We need an alternative to that. I mean, even NPR this morning, which, more often than not doesn't cover a lot of these stories because they're taking a lot of advertising dollars from these folks too. Even NPR this morning, at least here in Washington, D.C., I turned it on at 6 o'clock this morning when the cat woke me up. And what were they playing? The hearings from yesterday in the House, where people were talking about, the Democrats were getting up and saying the Republicans want Comcast to be able to sell your personal browsing history to anybody who wants it. And that's a bad thing. And, one little news outlet out of zillions covered that one story, but they're not going to cover, a lot of these other. It's just free speech TV is so important. And it doesn't exist without your help. With a $60 gift, you get a free speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of the Thom Hartmann Reader. It's a collection of, each chapter is from a different one of my books. So it's a great introduction to my writing if you want to give, if somebody's birthday's coming up or holidays, I guess Easter's coming up. Traditionally, we don't give books for Easter, but you always can. Whatever. It's a great introduction to my writing. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $150 gift, you get the book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, the Free Speech TV grocery bag, the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the Thom Hartmann Reader book, you get the Free Speech TV grocery bag, you get the Free Speech TV hat, you get the Free Speech TV hand fan, and the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. And with the $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. And you and maybe a few other folks, but, we typically keep these fairly small. And, whether it's pizza or there's a Thai restaurant, Ethiopian restaurant, there's all kinds of great places nearby. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Your support is needed now. Thank you so much for helping.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and very happy to have in the studio with me Charles Sauer, the libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute. The website is marketinstitute.org. You can tweet him at Market Institute, or if you want to get his personal Twitter, it's Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R.
Yeah.
You don't mind if people tweet you at your...
I rather it at my personal one. That's where.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
the conversation's better.
Yeah.
Out there.
Okay. So tweet Charles at Charles. If you're going to tweet him to beat him up, do it at Market Institute. If you're going to, no, I'm joking. Charles, S-A-U-E-R is Sauer. So here we've got Charles. let's talk economics, as we seem to do every week. We've got the Trump administration trying to put together a tax program, tax cuts and whatnot. And apparently they've enlisted Chris Christie, whose state just went through its 11th credit downgrade to be a significant part of this. But
not a good hire.
Yeah, well, I'm not certain how real that story is. I've just seen it in a couple of places, so we'll see. But the bottom line from my point of view is that tax policy is government/social policy. That we use taxes, historically, the idea was we'd use taxes to raise revenue for the government. Although we didn't even have an income tax until 1913, it was always tariffs. Tariffs paid for all of the government until Lincoln, paid for half of the government until Woodrow Wilson, paid for a third of the government until the 1950s, basically. The tariffs did. And then we started doing away with tariffs, and they went to income tax. And so, there are behaviors that we want to encourage. Like we want to encourage people to buy houses. Yep. Or at least that's what the banks and the housing industry wanted. So they lobbied to get an exemption from taxation for interest income.
I was going to say the liberals wanted, since that's who gets the majority of the benefit from that. But
well,
yes.
it was Republicans who passed it during the Eisenhower administration. So, they wanted to grow America. They wanted more people to own homes. They saw that as a social good.
Completely agree.
So, yeah. So whether it's right or not, because I'm a little squirrely about that. But whether it's right or not, we do tax policy really more for reasons of social policy and good governance, and the general welfare of the people, to quote the Constitution's preamble.
Like healthcare tax credits.
Yeah, exactly. Well, whatever. I mean, if there's a behavior you want to encourage, you do it. And so with a top tax rate of 74% prior to 1986, the behavior that we encouraged among the very, very rich was don't steal all the money, or don't take all the money. Leave that money in your company. The average CEO in 1985 was making 30 times what his average employee makes. Now the average CEO makes around 500 times what his average employee makes. And in some industries like banking, it can be 10,000 times what the average employee makes. And it just seems to me like we've lost sight of why we have the tax policies that we have, and that we really should be saying, what are our social goals? Is inequality something that's destructive to our society? I think there's a huge body of evidence that indicates that that's the case. So let's use tax policy to lessen inequality, for example.
I mean, the inequality is an interesting topic. And I think that the numbers that you used are interesting, but I think that what those do is really undermine the long run conversation that happens on inequality. And that's because the numbers are just skewed. The fact is, you likely have more wealth than I do, but you also have more years of experience under you, and we're both doing well. So I'm not complaining about where I'm at. I'm not complaining where you're at, but you should have more wealth than I do just based on the years. And so when we talk about the inequality numbers, the normal numbers compare you and I, and that doesn't make sense.
But we're talking apples and oranges here. I'm talking about billionaires and multi-billionaires and people who are earning. I mean, you got 20 people on Wall Street who earned more than $1 billion last year. What the hell? We don't pay brain surgeons $1 billion a year. What on God's green earth is worth, shuffling stocks around on Wall Street is worth $1 billion? Come on, Charles.
They're shuffling it around, and I mean, look, I don't have calluses on my hands. I am not out working outdoors every day. I did to help pay my way through college on the weekends. I did do outdoor work. I did wait tables. I did do things that were hard, but I now don't have those calluses on my hands. When people are outside working, that is hard labor. What we do, thinking and writing, might not be hard labor, but it's some form of work that is there. I do think what Wall Street is doing is work. It's hard to define, but they're investing in plants that Trump is bringing back or keeping in America.
These guys who are making $1 billion on Wall Street are not investing in anything. You know that. Well, they're skimming money off the top as they churn the market.
They're churning the market in an effective direction.
But we're
back to inequality.
Back in the weeds.
Can I go back to inequality? Sure. So there's all of the numbers that you have are there. They're real and out there. But when you actually compare it back to ages, you drop the inequality percentage down to, I think it's either 7 or 14%. where inequality is still real and significant, but the number is much less than the numbers that the left uses. And that's research that was done by Auerbach and Kotlikoff. I mean, these are real economists.
Well, and I would refer you to the Marshall Auerbach. I know Marshall Auerbach. He does some really great work. I would suspect that there's more to that research than what you just said.
That's their tax model that he just came out with Kotlikoff.
If you look at the consequences of high levels of inequality, first of all, we're at a level of inequality we haven't seen since 1929. High levels of inequality tend to destabilize economies. They're top heavy, basically. They fall over harder and easier, number one. Number two, if you look at the research that's been done by, well,
let me start with the top-heavy
out of the UK. Well, every index of social ill, the more unequal a society is, the more likely you are to have drug addiction, the more likely you are to have clinical depression, the more likely you are to have suicide, the more likely you are to have crime, the more likely you are, there's just this whole host of social ills that always accompany high levels of inequality.
Those are social ills that accompany having extra money. Those are social ills that accompany having extra time. Those are social ills that come from a prosperous economy.
No, mostly they come from poverty.
If you can solve all of those problems, if we don't have a prosperous economy, we can solve the problems of immigration for the right just by not having a good economy. When we have a bad economy, we have less illegal immigrants. So maybe that's something that the left agrees with the right on, that we should have a bad economy. But economists want economic growth, right? So we want a better economy. And, when people have extra money to spend, they end up spending it on something.
You want to double the GDP? You want to double the GDP of Washington, D.C.?
I would love to double the GDP, but I'm not going to do it by stealing money from other people.
If God forbid somebody were to drop a bomb on Washington D.C., you'd double the GDP because they'd have to rebuild the city. For example, and if you want to double the GDP of Washington State, have a forest fire that burns down all the trees.
It's called broken window economics. You can't walk down Main Street and make the world money. Right? You've just walked down Main Street breaking out windows.
Is a lousy measure.
And make the world money.
My point is the GDP saying, we just want growth. We want to increase GDP. As Bobby Kennedy pointed out back in 1967, GDP measures everything that's not important to us and doesn't measure the stuff that is important to us: the quality of our relationships, the strength of our neighborhoods, the quality of our families, the commitment to governance that we have.
A qualification. Let's quantify these things. And when you try to quantify it, you can claim that GDP isn't the number to do it. That's fine. Let's fight and find a different number to do it on. There's different numbers that we can use. We can look at consumer price indexes. We can do whatever. I'm fine with moving on to a different quantifiable subject. But if you're just going to do it on something that's qualified, now you're talking about a political game. And that's something that corporate America is always going to win, because they're going to put out the message to win that. This is a great quality neighborhood because, big corporation X is funding it.
What I was thinking of earlier was Richard Wilkerson and Kate Pickett, who wrote a book called The Spirit Level. And prior to that, they wrote a book called Why Inequality Matters. They're British economists or researchers. And they literally went state by state in the United States. The more unequal a state is in the United States, the worse all their social indices are. The more equal a state is in the United States, the better their social indices are. Then they did it with the entire world, the exact same results. So why not use tax policy? Why not roll back the Reagan tax cuts and go back to saying, if you make $3 million a year, cool. But if you're making over $3 million a year, you're going to start paying 74% income tax on that, which will encourage you, since, to cap your income at $3 million. So money stays in the company so you can pay people well. I mean, back when GM stockholders and executives were looking at those really high taxes, they had no problem paying their workers, in today's dollars, $45, $50 an hour. What's GM paying new workers right now? $9, $10 an hour. Because they're, the stockholders and the CEOs can take all that money at a low tax rate.
Most of those jobs are gone because the union and negotiated these rates, and now they dropped the jobs. Yes, it does. That's why we have the Rust Belt, because they don't have jobs.
No, it's because Reagan changed our tax policies.
That is no
and our trade policies.
Look, Reagan's tax policies here have been repeated around the world. You know, we have Reagan Revolution 2.0.
And particularly in the UK, actually Reagan stole the stuff from Thatcher, not the other way around. Thatcher started this 2 years before Reagan. And now the UK is the other country that has a massive inequality problem and has all these spreading social ills as a consequence of it. So
ask the countries that don't have the inequality problem if they would like to have the U.S.
I think I've been very clear about what I think we should, what our tax policy should be focused around. And the minute we have left, what do you think our tax policy should be focused around?
So I remember the birth of my thought process on tax policy was Ross Perot and his big ears and his postcard sheet.
Well, that was trade, not income tax.
Well, no, it was income tax, because he said if you make above this mark, you pay this much, and if you make below this mark, you don't pay anything.
Right.
And that was Ross Perot's simple message. That's not the tax plan that I would be with, but simplifying the tax code, not claiming that a postcard is the way to go, but simplifying the tax code. And in some cases,
well, how is simplicity, a virtue in and of itself?
Well, you end the mortgage interest deduction rate, which does nothing but
support the middle class.
It supports the middle class. You end
So you want to end the tax break for the middle class? You're going to keep the tax break for the oil companies?
No, you end the tax break on the oil companies. You end subsidies and tax breaks for energy companies, because why?
So you don't think we should be doing social engineering with tax policy?
I think we would have a better economy if we were not trying to socially engineer with tax policy.
Would we have a better society? Isn't that the whole point of government?
I think that's a good question for another day.
Okay, for another day. Charles Sauer. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer. It's marketinstitute.org.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks for dropping by.
Thank you.
Great having you. We'll be right back. Say what? Oh, we're back on the air. Gee, what a surprise. Let's see here. Andy watching Free Speech TV in Heron, Montana. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, sir. I'm calling because I keep hearing everyone talk about the Fairness in Reporting Act, and I'm simply wondering if today there is any action in Congress to get a new bill for that or to re-up the old bill for that.
What was the act again? I'm sorry, I missed a word there.
The Fairness in Reporting Act. I'm wondering if there is any action in Congress to renew that or put a new bill forth to ensure that we start getting some fairness in reporting again in our society.
Are you talking about the old fairness doctrine that Reagan ended?
Yes.
Okay. That was not a law. That was part of the FCC rules that were made by the FCC with the authorization of Congress. And because the FCC is an executive agency, they can choose not to enforce their own rules, which is what happened. Reagan in 87 said, don't enforce the fairness doctrine anymore, or I guess in 86, and then Limbaugh went on the air in 87. And then last year, President Obama said, we're going to take it right off the books altogether. We're just going to nuke it. And so the fairness doctrine is dead, which I think is a tragedy. But, it's only one piece of the problem, Andy. The other, frankly, I think much larger piece of it than the fairness doctrine, because basically the fairness doctrine required reporting in the public interest, which led to real news, as you correctly point out. But the other part of the FCC policies that were not the fairness doctrine, that got undone in 1996 when Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act, was ownership rules. So we went from over 10,000 companies and families owning radio and TV stations all across the United States to about 6 of them owning over 90% of our media. And that, in my opinion, is the biggest problem that we're facing, the biggest problem that we're confronting. Yeah, go ahead.
I understand and I agree with you. I've been a longtime listener of yours and following that situation. I'm just wondering if there is not something that can be done in today's world to get around the mergers and the corporate media that we've got and reinsure some way for our public to get this information.
We need to bring back the Sherman Act, Andy. We need to break up the big monopolies, including the big media monopolies. And frankly, I don't think that there's when you look at the polling of the public, the vast majority of Americans say big business is too big and big business has too much power. But that's a soft opinion, basically. It will become a hard opinion. It'll become a strong opinion. It'll become the kind of opinion that you can raise money on and you can run for political office on if and or when those big corporations crash our economy again. That's what happened in the 1930s. That's what provoked a lot of the trust busting. Actually, it's what happened in the 1880s, which is what led directly to the Sherman Antitrust Act of, I think, 1881, or maybe it was 1890, but whatever year it was passed. Senator Sherman from Ohio, brought this thing out, and it's still on the books, along with about a half a dozen of its errors, fine tunings of it. And we need to start enforcing those things. Now, I'm not expecting Donald Trump to enforce them, but if we get another FDR, if there is a crash and that brings about a real call for a change, then I think that there's a very real possibility. Andy, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Thom Hartmann here with you, and Maine in Chicago. Hey, Maine, thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
What you're talking about is democracy versus capitalism, and this is supposed to be a democratic society. So democracy is supposed to come before capitalism. We got it now where capitalism is running this country as though this is a total and completely capitalistic society, and they don't want to do anything for the people, which would be a democratic way of doing things, even though it may be social. And you know how they don't like that word social because then they want to fake it with, you're talking about socialism. But people are social. Anywhere there's gathered two people, that's social. That's socialism. So this thing about, you're talking about a socialistic society. That's not, no. We're talking about a democratic society where the people share in all things. I've said before, I believe that the people should get a piece of everything that comes out of the ground in the United States. I mean, they do it in Alaska, so they should do it for everyone. This here will stem some of this capitalism that we have here in America.
Yeah, Maine, you said it. You said it so well. I can't add anything to it. You're absolutely right. And this is the great conflict of our era, of our time, is the conflict between capitalism, which is reaching out and trying to control our government, and actually effectively, in large part, controlling our government, and a small d democracy, the idea that we're all in this together. The society was created by us, for us. It wasn't created by us for the billionaire class, although the billionaire class clearly thinks that they own this thing. and that they should continue to own it. And I think your analysis is spot on. It's what percentage of your friends do you think, or people you know, do you think really understand the difference between democracy and capitalism? In my life, it's probably 3%. I mean, very few people even ever think of this.
Right. Well, that's why we need to school them. I mean, I talk to people, and I know you do, and we need more broadcasts. From what I understand, we don't have enough radio. We just don't have enough communication with the people so that they know the difference of what's happening. These people now, you have so many people who walking around looking like hogs because they cut off their nose to spite their face.
Yeah.
When it comes to this, when it came to putting Trump in.
Yep.
And we need
Maine, we're out of time, but very, very well said. Thank you so much, and thanks for the call. We'll be right back with more of your calls after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day. I've got some very strange Jared Kushner stories and just amazing stuff. Stick around. Welcome back. It is the middle of our fundraising drive, the last week, the final week. Yesterday, we replayed Monday's request, pitch, whatever you call it, because I was at the dentist's office until about 5 minutes before I went on the air. My apologies. Apparently, that was a big mistake because we only raised $4,000 yesterday. We are now $6,000 behind our goal, and which is $10,000 a day, and we really need your help today. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now and make a contribution. We really need to keep this network going. There's a lot of great programming on this network. It's here because of you. It's here for you. So please step up if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you so much. I mean, we've been doing this for a little over 2 weeks, and a lot of people have called in and made a lot of contributions, and that is absolutely wonderful. Your support is so important. It's important to this show. It's important to Free Speech TV. It's important to the entire network. And frankly, it's important to democracy in America. Without Free Speech TV, without an independent voice, there's just giant holes in our coverage. While all the networks, the cable networks anyway, I haven't watched the ABC, CBS, NBC News in years, but CNN and MSNBC, for example, yesterday the House voted to sell your Social Security numbers, your private internet browsing history, all that kind of stuff, to give your internet service provider the right to completely sell that stuff to anybody. This was the vote that they took in the House. It was entirely a party line vote in both the House and the Senate. All the Democrats voted against it. All the Republicans voted in favor of it. And it passed both the House and the Senate, and it's going to Donald Trump's desk for his signature. And if it becomes law, none of us are safe from the predations of these giant internet service providers. Now, why is it that MSNBC chose to spend all day talking about Russia and not 5 minutes talking about the fact that the Republicans were selling the internet down the tubes? Could it have something to do with the fact that MSNBC is owned by Comcast, which is going to be the largest beneficiary of this legislation? Could it be that CNN is owned by Time Warner, which is merging with AT&T, which would be the second largest beneficiary of this legislation? I think so. And you're not going to hear the actual news on these networks when it conflicts with their interests. They take millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising money from big pharma and from big oil and big coal. And guess what? No discussion on these television networks about global climate change, about the impact of these products, about how we're literally daily being ripped off by big pharma. No discussion of any of it. They don't want to offend their advertisers. So between their advertisers and their owners, we don't just have a media problem in this country. We've got a billionaire problem. We've got an oligarch problem. We've got a monopoly problem. Giant monopolistic companies and the oligarchs who own and control them are defining what kind of political dialogue we can have in the United States in our mass media. That's not democracy. That's not even news. That's blatant self-promotion by billionaires and giant corporations that have us by the neck. We need an alternative to that. I mean, even NPR this morning, which, you know, more often than not doesn't cover a lot of these stories because they're taking a lot of advertising dollars from these folks too. Even NPR this morning, at least here in Washington, D.C., I turned it on at 6 o'clock this morning when the cat woke me up. And what were they playing? The hearings from yesterday in the House, where people were talking about, oh, you know, the Democrats were getting up and saying the Republicans want Comcast to be able to sell your personal browsing history to anybody who wants it. And that's a bad thing. And, you know, so, you know, one little news outlet out of zillions covered that one story, but they're not going to cover, you know, a lot of these other. It's just free speech TV is so important. And it doesn't exist without your help. With a $60 gift, you get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of the Thom Hartmann Reader. It's a collection of, each chapter is from a different one of my books, so it's a great introduction to my writing if you want to give, if somebody's birthday's coming up or holidays, you know, I guess Easter's coming up. Traditionally, we don't give books for Easter, but you always can. Whatever. It's a great introduction to my writing. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $150 gift, you get the book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, a Free Speech TV grocery bag, the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the you get the Thom Hartmann Reader book, you get the Free Speech TV grocery bag, you get the Free Speech TV hat, you get the Free Speech TV hand fan, and the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. And you and maybe a few other folks, but, you know, we do typically keep these fairly small. And, you know, whether it's pizza or there's a Thai restaurant, Ethiopian restaurant, there's all kinds of great places nearby. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Your support is needed now. Thank you so much for helping. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Don in Akron, Ohio. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Well, I was just was looking at your discussion with your previous guest, and just a comment about that discussion, and also your rumbles and similar conversations you have. I think they're informative in a limited sense, in that they give us an outlook onto a different mindset, a different worldview that these people have who are conservative or extremely right-wing. But they also demonstrate, to me, the futility of sitting down and having to converse or dispute or argue with them, because despite our underlying humanity, we have different human types. And these folks, I think it's cross-species communication. You know, there's been a lot of research about neurophysiology and the endocrine systems and all that of people who have different worldviews and politics. And we're really actually quite different, and we don't seem to evolve out of.
I don't entirely disagree, Don, but I do know a number of people, and they, you know, regularly call into this program. I get emails, people talk, you know, comment on our Facebook page and on Twitter or whatnot. People who thought that they were libertarians, thought they were conservatives, and then they started listening or watching this show. And, you know, after 6 months or a year or a couple of years, they're going, hey, holy cow, you're right. And in fact, that has actually happened with two people that I know of who originally came on as conservative guests and no longer will call themselves conservatives and are no longer working for conservative organizations. So, A, I'm not going to give it up. B, as long as nobody else in the media is talking back to these right-wing talking points, so nobody is modeling for people how to do it, I'm going to do it. And because I think it's useful. And C, I think, as you mentioned, I think that it's a great way to highlight the actual issues for people to see, okay, here's the talking point that's being used by the Republican Party, the billionaires, and the conservatives, and here's the talking point that basically makes sense to the rest of us Americans. John in Tualatin, Oregon. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I was going to talk earlier. Some discussion was about the tax. The voting rights of people. In the interstate cross-check. Mm-hmm. I've been wanting to call for a while on this. Why can't we use the First Amendment as a suppression of the right of the vote as a suppression of the First Amendment? Because it's, definitely stopping people from issuing their speech. If we can count it for money, if the big corporations and such can reach out to do it for that, it seems like you should be able to do it for that.
That makes perfect sense, John, that if the Supreme Court has ruled that billionaires spending money they're simply exercising their First Amendment right of free speech and therefore they can't be restrained, that our voting for somebody is the ultimate form of political speech, and therefore that shouldn't be restrained. The only problem is that would require a Supreme Court that doesn't have 5 conservatives on it.
No, I understand that, but I was thinking about it from when Representative Pocan was on there, of going about it, of drafting a bill to put the pressure on to put it in legislation. Now, I realize it could be challenged in court, but it would then get it to Supreme Court and, make them put pressure on, although we might not want the result if they ruled it didn't, but it would kind of conflict with the whole corporations thing, because I see a bigger picture thing that you could be trying to drive this issue of attention to the nation, that most of which doesn't pay attention to things like Citizens United. Right. A large segment of, especially on the other side. But that's just something I felt like it's a very easily winnable case, and it's ACLU or somebody could pick that up and go with it. I'm with you on the court. The court's taking it, but it also might be a case where if a lower court ruled on it, I could see the lower court ruling on it. It might go to the district court. I don't know why it would be appealed. Because it'd be hard to find grounds to deny it, so it may never have to make it to the Supreme Court level, unless, of course, we've just got some people like, our buddy from, I can't think of his name right now, that pushed interstate cross-check from Oklahoma or from Kansas.
Yeah, it was Chris Kobach, Secretary of State of Kansas.
Yeah. But it just seems like that would be a way to start fighting back.
It would be, but it would have to, again, it would take either a Supreme Court ruling, an amendment to the Constitution, or some very, very strong legislation that was Supreme Court proof.
Yeah.
And I'm all in favor of arguing for those things, John. I think you raised a really, really great point, and it's one that frankly hadn't occurred to me before. It's one of the benefits of doing this show with the smartest listeners in the country. And thank you for being one of them, John. I got to move along, but I love your point. Thank you, David in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Thank you. This is not why I called, but in my continuing mission to engage with conservatives, I called Mark Levin this week, and that was a real adventure. I'll tell you about it later, or I'll call you next week about it.
Oh, my. Okay.
You spoke last week about this new law where doctors can lie to women about the health of their fetus. I have a solution for that, and it can probably be done cheaply on one of those internet legal sites. But what a pregnant woman should do is have her doctor sign a confidentiality agreement where he agrees not to lie to her and not to disclose her medical condition. If the doctor then goes ahead and lies to her, he's not in violation of the federal law, but he would be in violation of the confidentiality agreement and subject to monetary damages.
Right. It would be a breach of contract. That's an interesting idea. Although, again, I'm guessing probably conservatives have already thought about that, and they just realized that 99% of women are not going to, go find a lawyer and draft a confidentiality agreement. Although maybe this is something Planned Parenthood could start printing out, by the bushel load and passing out. Except that they want to kill Planned Parenthood too. But yeah, that's an interesting one, David. Thank you for adding to
the stack, as it were. Mel in Cary, North Carolina. Hey, Mel, what's on your mind?
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Hold on, just have to get out of this room. I'm in a teacher's room. I'm a teacher.
Oh, great.
Anyway, so actually I'm in the hall now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a couple things. I think the Democrats ought to really compromise with the Republicans on things that can be compromised. Like I'm thinking in Denmark, one of the most liberal countries in the world. Everybody points to Denmark. In Denmark, they have a 12-week restriction on abortion unless, extreme circumstances, the health of the mother, rape, incest, but they've compromised, a liberal country has compromised to a 12-week restriction. Now, I think that's something the Democrats and Republicans, if they can actually sit together and respect each other and not shout at each other, I think they can come to some of these compromises. Now, there's some things that
it's not inconceivable. A lot of the pushback against liberal abortion laws in Europe is coming out of the white nationalists in Europe. They're saying, hey, wait a minute, easy to get abortions are going to reduce the number of white people in our country, and the white right wing in Denmark is actually fairly strong. I've been there. I've talked to them.
Yeah.
And so there are layers. When we start quoting what's going on in other countries, and don't include the context and the nuance, I think we're doing a disservice to people. And I don't think in the United States you're going to find Democrats and Republicans coming together on that issue. Although I think that it's a mistake for the Republican Party to say that they are totally always absolutely anti-abortion. And it's a mistake for the Democratic Party to say that they are always totally, in favor of relatively unrestricted abortion. This is an issue that, frankly, in my opinion, only let women vote on it. But that's a whole other thing. Back to you, Mel.
Well, I happen to be a Christian, but
when did Jesus talk about abortion, Mel?
I am willing to compromise.
No. When did Jesus talk about abortion? I know, in the Bible, there are several places in the Bible where God causes abortions, and there's at least one place where God recommends an abortion. And there is a law in Deuteronomy that if you strike a woman and it causes an abortion or a miscarriage, that you have to pay her husband, I think it's 10 pieces of silver. So abortion is throughout the Bible. I don't recall any place where, particularly in the New Testament, where abortion is prohibited. Do you? Can you cite me the chapter and verse?
I kind of don't want to get into theology with you.
Well, you're the one who started out by saying I'm a Christian, therefore.
No. I said I am a Christian, but I am willing to sit down with pro-choice people and compromise. Okay, I am willing to do that because we live in a democracy. We don't live in a theocracy. We live in a democracy where the majority believe in pro-choice.
But Mel, why are we even having a conversation about the tenets of what you consider to be Christianity being made into law? Shouldn't it be that if somebody, violates the laws of Christianity, and in this case, we're really talking about Catholicism, that they go to hell, let the Pope deal with them. Now, this is not the business of the federal government.
All right. You exactly have a point there. And if I sat down with you, we could discuss that point. But I really want one more thing to talk about because you can go on and on about it.
Well, I'm sorry, Mel. We're out of time. We'll be back in just a minute. Mel, thanks a lot for the call and thanks for listening to Sirius XM. We'll be back in just a second, and then we'll be picking up Talk Media. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with Talk Media News and more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Gene, watching Free Speech TV in Abilene, Texas. Hey, Gene, what's on your mind today?
Oh, I've been listening for so long with this phone in my ear till I got my thoughts jumbled.
Okay. Well, it says here you called about Bill O'Reilly. Does that help?
Yeah. You're one of the few people who I know has the guts to speak up to or talk to Bill O'Reilly.
He only had me on his show once. He wouldn't bring me back after I think I kind of kicked his butt. But
well, anyway. He needs his butt kicked a lot.
Yeah.
He has this tendency. I don't watch him often, but at least once a week. And each time I watch him, he has this thing where he has to dig up something that is as negative as possible about black people or people of color, illegals, immigrants, but he never makes it a point. Like this just recently where that guy traveled for many miles to get to New York to kill black people.
Right.
I'm sure you're aware of that.
I'm very familiar with it, and you're right. To the best of my knowledge, I mean, I'm not a regular Bill O'Reilly watcher. I catch his show maybe once a month, but I've never seen, in all the years that Bill O'Reilly's been on television, I've never seen him directly go after white people the way he goes after people of color. And his comments about Maxine Waters a couple days ago were just beyond the pale. And I was, really impressed. I think it was this morning, might have been yesterday morning, but I'm pretty sure it was this morning that Joe Madison on Sirius XM, the African-American talk show host, said that, Bill O'Reilly can kiss my black ass. And I'm like, yes, I salute that. And he can, it's just, people are talking back to him. Gene?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just listening. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Well, I think that Bill O'Reilly has been peddling soft racism for years and years, and not just Bill O'Reilly. I think the entire right-wing machine, the entire, it's the entirety of Fox News, essentially. Breitbart used to have a column that was black crime. It's, right. I mean, it's like these guys, they're not even pretending not to be using race, for political purposes. Right. And at times it just leaves me speechless, Gene. It's
I don't understand why they never call out like the alt-right or the Ku Klux Klan or people like that.
Yep.
They never label them as terrorists.
Right, and right-wing white people have committed more terror acts in the United States since 9/11 than have people of color or Muslims. I mean, it's just it's the biggest problem with terrorism that we have in the United States is from right-wingers who are U.S. citizens, and you will not hear that on Fox News. You will not hear that, in much of the media, tragically. But it's true. It's the case. Gene, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Joan in Seattle. Hey, Joan, what's on your mind today? Joan,
Hello?
You are on the air.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
So I was listening to Mark Pocan this week, and
Mark Pocan.
last week.
Right.
Pardon. Oh, I'm sorry, Scott. I'm a new listener. Complained that the mainstream press is not covering their progressive press conferences.
Mm-hmm.
So it just occurred to me that if they had an army of supporters, those supporters could then complain to the press.
Yeah, well, I think people do, and these people between them, among them, the various members of the House Progressive Caucus have a fairly robust mailing list. I get these things, but the media is just
completely ignoring, and has for years and years, by the way, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is the second largest caucus in Congress. And, you know, if the Tea Party caucus, now called the Freedom Caucus, does anything, it gets instantly covered. But if the Progressive Caucus does anything, it doesn't get covered at all. And it's a real tragedy. Joan, thank you for the call. Patrick Gavin is with us with Talk Media News. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen's new book. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. Loving What You Do, The Elements of a Great Working Life, which is now available on Amazon. Patrick, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. And by the way, I do love what I do, per Ellen Ratner's book.
There you go. So do I, for that matter. So what's happening in the world today, Patrick?
Well, the one news story that I think a lot of reporters in D.C. can't quite wrap their heads around, and perhaps you can, is this idea that, in fact, Republicans are going to try to resuscitate, repeal, and replace. It's one of these stories that I think is interesting on a number of levels. One, to be honest, I just don't believe it. I think that the fact of the matter is that Republicans learned the lesson the hard way last week, which is that, you know, their own party isn't quite in line with each other. Two, healthcare reform is incredibly hard. But I think the reason that these stories are percolating is simply because they're being asked, which is that, you know, these Republicans who have been talking about repealing and replacing Obamacare for 6-7 years, they can't only 60 days into controlling all three branches of government just confess that they're totally done with this issue. Right. So I think, of course, they're going to percolate this idea that they're going to resuscitate it, but there's very little reason to think that the reality on the ground for them politically or policy-wise is going to change. So, I mean, I don't know what you think, but I think this is one of these sort of false trial balloons, which is that I find it very hard to believe, especially with Trump in the White House, who's already expressed his disdain for this issue, the fact that Republicans are going to try to bring this thing back up again.
Yeah. I'm guessing that they'll come up with some tweaks around the edges or some sabotage things and get something relatively small and innocuous passed where there's a consensus in the caucus, and Trump will sign it and declare victory. And you know, it's sort of like, who is the senator from Vermont? I'm blanking on his name, but way back in 1968, he said to Lyndon Johnson, you know, with regard to Vietnam, you should just declare victory and come home. And I think that my prediction, Patrick, is that they'll come up with some small thing, you know, in the grand scheme of things, and label it a major victory and declare victory. So, but we'll see.
Well, what's interesting, the one benefit of not keeping this issue alive, or maybe not the only benefit, but one great big benefit of this issue being over and done with for Republicans is that they don't have to deal with it when they go back home during the August recess, which would have been kind of a nightmare, I imagine, if the debate was still happening. So by keeping this issue alive, I kind of feel like they're just opening themselves up to more grief when they go back to their constituents, especially from the Democratic side, who, you know, are more organized and mobilized and focus on these town halls. And so if at all going into August, this is even on the table, I think it's going to be an ugly month for a lot of Republicans who are willing to talk about repealing Obamacare back home with their constituents.
Well, plus increasingly when Republicans go home, it's not just the little 20, 30, 40 Republicans who typically showed up for these town halls. Now they've got 1,000 Democrats showing up too, or just 1,000 citizens who are really, really seriously angry. But anyhow, what else is going on in the world?
Well, the other big news we got yesterday was that April 7th will be the date that Neil Gorsuch's nomination to be Supreme Court will get voted on. Democrats have been.
Is that in the Senate or in the committee?
In the committee. Apologize.
Okay.
And I think that Democrats have gotten, you know, about 20 votes right now to oppose Gorsuch, but not, you know, I find it very hard to believe they're going to get enough to prevent Gorsuch from getting 50 votes. You know, and I think the one thing that's sort of interesting here is assuming that happens and Mitch McConnell has to employ the nuclear option, you know, what fallout, if any, will there be for McConnell? In other words, is that sort of the game that Democrats are playing by forcing their hand? And two, let's not forget that it's not just McConnell's decision. They have to get other, I think it's 50 Republican senators to support this nuclear option too. And will there be any sort of, you know, institutionalist, establishment, long-term Republican who will...
Yeah, Susan Collins and John McCain have both expressed some reservations about this, but they can afford to lose up to, 3 votes if it ends up in a tie, or 2 votes, I guess, if it ends up in a tie, and what's his name, Pence has to go in and split break the tie. But yeah, it's going to be real interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I wonder too if people around the country, or more specifically in Mitch McConnell's home state, are going to view the nuclear option as an albatross to hang around his neck. Or
I don't think people care.
I don't think they do either.
I don't think they're even noticing. I think probably fewer than 1/2 of Americans even realize that the Democrats killed the filibuster on lower level judicial hearings back in 15, 16, whatever year it was, 14. I forget the year now. I just don't, I think that Mitch McConnell will probably pull the nuclear option if he needs to, and I don't think that anybody's going to, it'll just be a whimper.
And it's sort of the sad new state of affairs, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, the last thing I was just going to bring up is, the two interesting things I thought out of President Trump's EPA announcement, his policy on the coal industry and fossil fuel industry yesterday was two things. One is that he didn't mention the Paris trade agreements, which sort of surprised me. I mean, why, if you're Donald Trump, why wouldn't you use that as an occasion to go after that? So I wonder if there is any hope that, in fact, his policy on regards to pulling out of that agreement won't be as bad as environmentalists think.
Well, ExxonMobil yesterday lobbied the White House to keep in the Paris Agreement, so, which is interesting. And the military, General, what's his name, the head of the Defense Department, Mattis is quite outspoken that global climate change is real and the DOD needs to get ready for it. That might have something to do with it. I don't know. Patrick, thank you. Patrick Gavin with Talk Media News.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Here with your world in 2 minutes, I'm your
This
host,
year's
Luke
election
Vargas.
results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
Our democracy.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.
Welcome back. It is the middle of our fundraising drive, the last week, the final week. Yesterday, we replayed Monday's request, pitch, whatever you call it, because I was at the dentist's office until about 5 minutes before I went on the air. My apologies. Apparently, that was a big mistake because we only raised $4,000 yesterday. We are now $6,000 behind our goal, and which is $10,000 a day, and we really need your help today. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now and make a contribution. We really need to keep this network going. There's a lot of great programming on this network. It's here because of you. It's here for you. So please step up if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you so much. I mean, we've been doing this for a little over 2 weeks, And a lot of people have called in and made a lot of contributions, and that is absolutely wonderful. Your support is so important. It's important to this show. It's important to Free Speech TV. It's important to the entire network. And frankly, it's important to democracy in America. Without Free Speech TV, without an independent voice, there's just giant holes in our coverage. While all the networks, the cable networks anyway, I haven't watched the ABC, CBS, NBC News in years, but CNN and MSNBC, for example, yesterday the House voted to sell your Social Security numbers, your private internet browsing history, all that kind of stuff, to give your internet service provider the right to completely sell that stuff to anybody. This was the vote that they took in the House. It was entirely a party line vote in both the House and the Senate. All the Democrats voted against it. All the Republicans voted in favor of it. And it passed both the House and the Senate, and it's going to Donald Trump's desk for his signature. And if it becomes law, none of us are safe from the predations of these giant internet service providers. Now, why is it that MSNBC chose to spend all day talking about Russia and not 5 minutes talking about the fact that the Republicans were selling the internet down the tubes? Could it have something to do with the fact that MSNBC is owned by Comcast, which is going to be the largest beneficiary of this legislation? Could it be that CNN is owned by Time Warner, which is merging with AT&T, which would be the second largest beneficiary of this legislation? I think so. And you're not going to hear the actual news on these networks when it conflicts with their interests. They take millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising money from big pharma and from big oil and big coal. And guess what? No discussion on these television networks about global climate change, about the impact of these products, about how we're literally daily being ripped off by big pharma. No discussion of any of it. They don't want to offend their advertisers. So between their advertisers and their owners, we don't just have a media problem in this country. We've got a billionaire problem. We've got an oligarch problem. We've got a monopoly problem. Giant monopolistic companies and the oligarchs who own and control them are defining what kind of political dialogue we can have in the United States in our mass media. That's not democracy. That's not even news. That's blatant self-promotion by billionaires and giant corporations that have us by the neck. We need an alternative to that. I mean, even NPR this morning, which, more often than not doesn't cover a lot of these stories because they're taking a lot of advertising dollars from these folks too. Even NPR this morning, at least here in Washington, D.C., I turned it on at 6 o'clock this morning when the cat woke me up. And what were they playing? The hearings from yesterday in the House, where people were talking about, the Democrats were getting up and saying the Republicans want Comcast to be able to sell your personal browsing history to anybody who wants it. And that's a bad thing. And, one little news outlet out of zillions covered that one story, but they're not going to cover, a lot of these other. It's just Free Speech TV is so important. And it doesn't exist without your help. With a $60 gift, you get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of the Thom Hartmann Reader. It's a collection of, each chapter is from a different one of my books, so it's a great introduction to my writing if you want to give, if somebody's birthday's coming up or holidays, I guess Easter's coming up. Traditionally, we don't give books for Easter, but you always can. Whatever. It's a great introduction to my writing. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $150 gift, you get the book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, a Free Speech TV grocery bag, the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get you get the Thom Hartmann Reader book, you get the Free Speech TV grocery bag, you get the Free Speech TV hat, you get the Free Speech TV hand fan, and the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. And you and maybe a few other folks, but, we typically keep these fairly small. And, whether it's pizza or there's a Thai restaurant, Ethiopian restaurant, there's all kinds of great places nearby. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Your support is needed now. Thank you so much for helping.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Steve Phillips. Steve Phillips is the founder of Democracy in Color. He's a civil rights lawyer and senior fellow with the Center for American Progress. DemocracyInColor.com is the website. He's also the author of the book Brown is the New White, How the Demographic Revolution Has Created a New American Majority. And you can tweet him at Steve P. Tweets. Hey, Steve, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
It's always a pleasure. So you guys are working on a plan that involves 17 states and changing the political contours of our country. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we released a plan called Return of the Majority, a roadmap for taking back our country. And so it's designed as with a challenge to the Democrats and progressives around how they spend their money and resources, as also as a resource to the resistance across the country, people trying to fight back against this administration. And so the essence of what we're doing is trying to channel the energy and the resources to the right places and people. And we're highlighting in particular the 17 states that were decided by single digits in this last election. We're calling those the frontline states, and really lifting up groups in those states, calling frontline freedom fighters, who are doing tangible, effective voter mobilization work to increase the turnout of voters of color and progressive whites. And our analysis is that the way to win is to increase the participation of those kinds of voters, rather than to spend time in kind of an existential crisis trying to chase the people who may have defected to the current White House occupant.
Right. And in a way, this is kind of pushing back against the use of race by the right-wingers, going back to Nixon's Southern strategy, is it not?
Yeah, well, the irony is that our strategy is actually a Southern strategy. And so Nixon's approach was to try to use racial resentment and to drive a wedge and to inflame the opposition of more conservative and fearful whites. Whereas the reality is that the South and Southwest are actually home to large numbers of eligible non-voting people of color and progressive whites.
And so the job here is to, and by the way, the states, if any of our listeners or viewers live in any of these states, this is something to perk your ears up about. Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Virginia, and Wisconsin. If I have the list right, Steve?
Yes.
Okay. So if somebody lives in one of those states and they want to participate, they go to your website, democracyincolor.com, and do what?
So we're listing out groups in those states. So we're trying to connect people wherever they are. So part of the issue is people in California and New York, how can they be most helpful? And so it's to be able to find and channel support to efforts in those states. And so it's kind of like in the ways in the 60s, people sent support to the South. That was the front lines of the civil rights struggle. It's a similar situation now. And so can we be able to organize wherever you are? Like in 2004, MoveOn did these base sales for democracy. Recently, they had the ACLU coffee day. You could buy coffee. Some of the money would actually go to ACLU. So if you're in wherever state you're in the country, organize support in that area, but then send it to the front lines. Groups like Texas Organizing Project, One Arizona, New Georgia Project, they should become the groups that we try to channel resources and support to so they can do the work to increase the voter participation so we can actually flip those states, because the numbers are there to be able to flip them.
So are you suggesting that rather than creating a new infrastructure, what you all want to do is be supportive of and funnel people into the existing infrastructure in each one of these states that espouses progressive values and brings together people of all races?
Exactly. And so there are groups now. So in Arizona, there's a coalition of 12 different groups, community-based organizations, mainly run by people of color, that did 150,000 voter registrations, mainly Latino voters, in 2016. That kind of group could use more support to go to a larger scale. We're drawing from UC Berkeley professor Lisa Garcia Bedoya put forward this concept on the civic web, where you have rooted in communities, you have paid staff working with community groups who then recruit volunteer neighborhood leaders, volunteer block captains. And in that process, you're able to reach large numbers of voters and increase voter turnout. That model is much more effective than the Democratic approach of just running television ads all the time. So we're fostering that. Take these groups to scale. The Democratic Party should also be investing in these states, building up their operation, working in partnership with community-based organizations. And that's the way to go about taking back the country, not going contortions to try to win back Trump voters.
Yeah, amen. We're talking with Steve Phillips, founder of Democracy in Color, the website democracyincolor.com. You can tweet him at Democracy in Color or at Steve P. Tweets. And Steve, the Democratic Party is in a bit of, I'm not sure if crisis is the right word, but let's say transition right now. And in fact, Tom Perez, the new chair of the Democratic Party, just basically asked for everybody's resignation letter, and they're kind of rebooting that. You're talking about working with and through the Democratic Party. Are you getting any signals from them that they're up for this? I mean, this is kind of the antithesis of what happened over the last 8 years, but it does harken back in many ways, it seems, to Howard Dean's 50-state strategy.
Right. Yeah, and I think that Tom is open and interested in moving the party in a new direction. I think it's pretty clear that this obsession with 30-second television ads, trying to win back the moderate to conservative swing voters, doesn't work. It isn't working. So he has expressed a commitment to and an orientation to try to move more in that direction, putting the party on the ground, working with community organizations, increasing turnout. On the House Representatives side, it's actually been very encouraging initial feedback that under Ben Ray Lujan and Dan Senna, the executive director, they've hired 20 full-time staff and put them into districts across the country already, the earliest they've ever done that. They have 9 people on the ground in Georgia's sixth seat, the open seat Tom Price had, to increase voter turnout and participation. So that shows a shift in strategic thinking, followed by a shift in allocation of strategic resources.
Remarkable. So what can people do who may be listening or watching right now to help out, basically? What would you like people to do in response to listening to this program?
So I would say 2 to 3 things, and they're captured in our report, which is available on our website, democracyincolor.com. One is, ideally, people should be trying to sponsor or create like a sister organization relationship with one of these frontline freedom fighter organizations in Florida, and Georgia, and Texas, and Arizona, and North Carolina, to be able to build a relationship, support them, organize support where you are locally. You could do, video chats with them and house parties where you are. That would be a critical thing to be able to do. The other is to look at upcoming races in those states that are very significant. Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum running for governor of Florida. Georgia House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams may run for governor of Georgia. She'd be the first Black woman ever to be elected governor in this country. So get behind those candidates, get behind them early. And then at our Democracy in Color site, we're going to be creating a fund that could be a funnel. If you want us to do the work for you, you can contribute to that, and we'll move money out to these groups and these campaigns.
That is absolutely great. Steve Phillips is the founder of Democracy in Color. Democracyincolor.com is the website. He's also the author of a brilliant book, Brown is the New White, how the demographic revolution has created a new American majority. And you can tweet him at Steve P. Tweets. Steve, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me out.
Great talking with you, and I wish you the very, very best. It's great work that you're doing. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day. There's still more news to share with you right after this.
And welcome back. Bill in Camp Wood, Texas. Hey, Bill, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
I just have a question about China. I've always wondered and never been able to find it. Has China ever had a terrorist attack by ISIL or Al-Qaeda?
China has... I don't know. I know that they have done some serious suppression of some of their minorities. The Uyghurs come to mind immediately, right. and the Tibetans. But I'm not. I don't think the Uyghurs are Muslim. I think that they may be Buddhist. I could be wrong. I don't know that much about the region. Well, why do you ask, Bill?
Well, Osama bin Laden said the reason he attacked the United States was because we were in the Middle East.
Right.
And I think if you could see if China's never been attacked, because as far as I know, they have no soldiers or military in the Middle East, that would pretty well prove what he said.
Yeah, China is just now, and by just now I mean like over the last 5 years, 10 years at the very most, starting to expand in consequential ways. And they're doing it mostly in very, very poor countries, largely in Africa, where you find a country that's got $1 trillion worth of resources, but only $1 billion GDP. And you go in and you funnel a lot of money and you buy a lot of politicians, and then you get access to those resources. And China is buying rare earth minerals out of Africa. They're buying oil out of Africa. They're exporting gold and diamonds out of Africa, all kinds of stuff. And in fact, I've been in China or in Africa, in Sudan and in Kenya, and seen this firsthand. It's really quite substantial. But I think you're right. It's like, had we not been supporting Saudi Arabia all these years, and had we not been, so as involved in the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis, frankly, I doubt that Osama bin Laden would have turned his wrath on us at all. So
that's right. That's what I figured.
Yeah, and I think China is playing it smart in that regard. Bill, thanks a lot for the call. Harry in Satsuma, Florida. Harry, we got a minute and a half to the break. What's up? Harry? Watching Free Speech TV?
Hello. How you doing?
Good. Quick one?
Yeah, very quick one. Listen, I was talking about Bernie and the Democratic Party.
Right.
I'm 81. I've been watching this stuff for quite a while. And I've been watching you and been reading the Guardian newspaper a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm thinking about is not only are we the problem in America, but the Democratic is a problem. The people that run the Democratic organization, and lots of them have, what I say, put the boots to Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
If Bernie didn't get that kind of treatment from his own party, and we were a lot smarter because we didn't know it all, because everybody shuts all the information out, all these problems that you talk about and I think about would probably been taken care of over the next 4 years if Bernie would have been in there. Thank you very much, Tom.
You're welcome, Harry. I agree with your analysis. I completely agree with your analysis. Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Bruce in Clinton, Iowa. Hey, Bruce, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I've been reflecting a lot with Trump in the White House with Jimmy Carter. And the reason I say that's not just because one of them said he'd never lie to us and the other one doesn't seem to ever tell us the truth.
Right.
But I've been thinking of this from an energy standpoint with what Trump is trying to roll back. And thinking about Jimmy Carter in the late 70s when he was trying to take us on a path for clean energy. And I guess I'd like your opinion on this. Where do you think as a nation and maybe even as a globe we would be if we would have followed a path to reusable energy back then.
Yeah. Well, and this is a real issue. And Chris, I'm going to feed you some audio out of my computer, so whichever pot that's on. This back in 1970, July 15th, 1979, Jimmy Carter made a declaration, and he had legislation to back it up, that we were going to create an energy bank, that we were going to become energy independent. I mean, it's really remarkable. And he put this into place. He put solar panels on the White House. And 1 year later, a year and a half later, Ronald Reagan came into office and destroyed the entire thing, which is essentially what Donald Trump is doing right now to Barack Obama's legacy with regard to energy and things like that. And let me just play for you real quickly Jimmy Carter, the two comments that he made from the White House. I remember watching this on July 15th, 1979. Here is the former president of the United States.
The energy crisis is real. It is worldwide. It is a clear and present danger to our nation. These are facts, and we simply must face them. What I have to say to you now about energy is simple and vitally important. Point one, I am tonight setting a clear goal for the energy policy of the United States. Beginning this moment, this nation will never use more foreign oil than we did in 1977. Never.
And he put us on the path to that. Here's the second part.
Moreover, I will soon submit legislation to Congress calling for the creation of this nation's first solar bank, which will help us achieve the crucial goal of 20% of our energy coming from solar power by the year 2000.
By the year 2000. Isn't that tragic? I mean, talk about, opportunity lost. It's just tragic.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's so many people that have this ostrich approach to it when it comes to energy. They just put their head in the sand and say, let's just keep on doing what we've been doing.
Yeah, I agree. And why anybody would want to stretch out 19th century energy sources that are literally killing us and our planet when we have 21st century energy sources that could renew us and our planet and that are actually cheaper than the fossil fuels if you take away the fossil fuel subsidies. The only reason that anybody is doing this is because you've got a bunch of people who are worth hundreds of billions of dollars in aggregate, who make money off fossil fuels, who have bought politicians, who have sponsored think tanks, who are promoting disinformation. And that's it. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Bruce, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Very well said. Mary in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind today?
Hello. What's on my mind is Nunes.
Right.
I was wondering, what job or what part did he play in the Trump campaign?
He was part of the transition team. He was one of the advisors who recommend to Trump who to put in their administration and who not to put in their administration. And my guess is that as part of that transition team, he was one of the people, Nunes himself, he was one of the people who got picked up on the FBI or CIA or whatever wiretaps. And he might have been saying things that would be very embarrassing if they were ever go public, and that's why he's participating with the Trump guys in this cover-up, in my opinion. I mean, that's just the Occam's razor answer is, generally when somebody's acting this bizarre, acting like they're trying to hide something, they actually are trying to hide something.
Yes, and then I've noticed that I watch like CNN and MSNBC. They all say that he went to see the president, but nobody seems to ever mention that he went to see Paul Ryan.
Right.
First.
Well, no, but he, did he?
Well, I've heard it on the other stations that he went to see Paul Ryan first, but I have heard that. But nobody ever mentioned that he went to see Paul Ryan first.
Yeah, I just don't know, Mary. I don't know. Mary, thank you for the call. I have to move along, but thank you for the call. It's an excellent point. Bob in Vallejo, New Mexico. Am I saying it right, Bob? Listening on KTRC?
Hey, can you hear me okay, Tom?
Just fine, Bob. We've got about a minute and a half till the break. What's up?
That's Vallecitos, New Mexico.
Thank you.
Greetings from the land of enchantment.
Thank you.
The reason why I'm calling is that beginning in 1970, I began to compile the Great Mandate. Have you heard of that?
No.
It is a move on campaign now. In other words, anyone in the United States can go and sign a mandate where we get rid of corporate personhood. We establish a true democracy. The first mandate is to declare a state of planetary crisis so that our nation directs all of our attention to saving the planet and to making a regenerative future for our grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful document that can be checked out at moveon.org and signed. It has 32 points, including that agribusiness go regenerative.
Wow.
That was discussed on NPR, because if we had companies like Monsanto doing research and development in organic gardening, we would be bringing back.
Yeah, except they don't have a revenue model for it. That's the problem. You know, you can't make money if you're a pesticide company. You can't make money with organic gardening. But Thom, that's great. I'll have to check it out. Thanks for the heads up on it. I really appreciate it. And thanks for listening to KTRC, our oldest affiliate, our longest held affiliate. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls after this, plus 5 creepy things your ISP can now do and has done in the past before it was made illegal. Right. Welcome back. It is the middle of our fundraising drive, the last week, the final week. Yesterday, we replayed Monday's request, pitch, whatever you call it, because I was at the dentist's office until about 5 minutes before I went on the air. My apologies. Apparently, that was a big mistake because we only raised $4,000 yesterday. We are now $6,000 behind our goal, and which is $10,000 a day, and we really need your help today. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now and make a contribution. We really need to keep this network going. There's a lot of great programming on this network. It's here because of you. It's here for you. So please step up if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you so much. I mean, we've been doing this for a little over 2 weeks, and a lot of people have called in and made a lot of contributions, and that is absolutely wonderful. Your support is so important. It's important to this show. It's important to Free Speech TV. It's important to the entire network. And frankly, it's important to democracy in America. Without Free Speech TV, without an independent voice, you know, there's just giant holes in our coverage. While all the networks, well, the cable networks anyway, I haven't watched the ABC, CBS, NBC News in years, but CNN and MSNBC, for example, yesterday the House voted to sell your Social Security numbers, your private internet browsing history, all that kind of stuff, to give your internet service provider the right to completely sell that stuff to anybody. This was the vote that they took in the House. It was entirely a party line vote in both the House and the Senate. All the Democrats voted against it. All the Republicans voted in favor of it. And it passed both the House and the Senate, and it's going to Donald Trump's desk for his signature. And if it becomes law, none of us are safe from the predations of these giant internet service providers. Now, why is it that MSNBC chose to spend all day talking about Russia and not 5 minutes talking about the fact that the Republicans were selling the internet down the tubes? Could it have something to do with the fact that MSNBC is owned by Comcast, which is going to be the largest beneficiary of this legislation? Could it be that CNN is owned by Time Warner, which is merging with AT&T, which would be the second largest beneficiary of this legislation? I think so. And you're not going to hear the actual news on these networks when it conflicts with their interests. They take millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising money from big pharma and from big oil and big coal. And guess what? No discussion on these television networks about global climate change, about the impact of these products, about how we're literally daily being ripped off by big pharma. No discussion of any of it. They don't want to offend their advertisers. So between their advertisers and their owners, we don't just have a media problem in this country.
We've got a billionaire problem. We've got an oligarch problem. We've got a monopoly problem. Giant monopolistic companies and the oligarchs who own and control them are defining what kind of political dialogue we can have in the United States in our mass media. That's not democracy. That's not even news. That's blatant self-promotion by billionaires and giant corporations that have us by the neck. We need an alternative to that. I mean, even NPR this morning, which, you know, more often than not doesn't cover a lot of these stories because they're taking a lot of advertising dollars from these folks too. Even NPR this morning, at least here in Washington, D.C., I turned it on at 6 o'clock this morning when the cat woke me up. And what were they playing? The hearings from yesterday in the House, where people were talking about, oh, you know, the Democrats were getting up and saying the Republicans want Comcast to be able to sell your personal browsing history to anybody who wants it. And that's a bad thing. And, you know, so, you know, one little news outlet out of zillions covered that one story, but they're not going to cover, you know, a lot of these other. It's just free speech TV is so important. And it doesn't exist without your help. With a $60 gift, you get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of the Thom Hartmann Reader. It's a collection of, each chapter is from a different one of my books, so it's a great introduction to my writing if you want to give, if somebody's birthday's coming up or holidays, you know, I guess Easter's coming up. Traditionally, we don't give books for Easter, but you always can. Whatever. It's a great introduction to my writing. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $150 gift, you get the book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, the Free Speech TV grocery bag, the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the you get the Thom Hartmann Reader book, you get the Free Speech TV grocery bag, you get the Free Speech TV hat, you get the Free Speech TV hand fan, and the Free Speech TV bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. And you and maybe a few other folks, but, you know, we do typically keep these fairly small. And, you know, whether it's pizza or there's a Thai restaurant, Ethiopian restaurant, there's all kinds of great places nearby. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Your support is needed now. Thank you so much for helping. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Since we're playing Jimmy Carter clips, I just have one really short one that I want to share with you. I think this is just great. This is from an interview that I had with Jimmy Carter. It was back in 2000. Well, no, it wasn't in 2000. It was, I'm not sure what year it was. But anyhow, here's President Carter.
I don't think that George W. Bush won the election in 2000 against Al Gore because I think he probably lost Florida and also that nationwide.
There you go. Jimmy Carter. Yep. George W. Bush was a loser. Okay, I promised you 5 creepy things your ISP can do. This is from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. EFF.org is their website. The number 1, they can sell your data to marketers. Number 2, they can hijack your searchers. And ISPs have done this before. Charter, Cogent, DirectPC, Frontier, and Wide Open West, to name a few. Back in 2011, they note, several ISPs were caught red-handed working with a company called Paxfire to hijack their customers' search queries to Bing, Yahoo, and Google. And when you entered a search term, your ISP directed that query to Paxfire instead of to an actual search engine. Paxfire then checked what you were searching for to see if it matched a list of companies that had paid them for more traffic. If your query matched one of those brands, in other words, you type in Apple, Dell, or Wall Street Journal to name a few, then Paxfire would send you directly to that company's website instead of sending you to a search engine. That's, you know, number 1, they can hijack your searches. Number 2, they can snoop through your traffic and insert ads. And yes, this has been done before. Charter, AT&T, and CMA all did this. AT&T did it on some of their paid Wi-Fi hotspots. Charter did it with its broadband customers. CMA did the same thing. ISPs have every incentive, they write, to snoop your traffic, record what you're browsing, and then inject ads into your traffic based on your browsing history.
They could hire a third-party company like Nebu Ad or Form to do all this for them. We're talking about a company that carries all your internet traffic, examining each packet in detail to build a profile on you. They're looking at literally everything you do. Number 4, pre-installing software on your phone and recording every URL you visit. Yes, AT&T has done this, Sprint has done this, and T-Mobile have done this. When you buy a new Android phone, you probably expect it to come with some bloatware, they write, apps installed by the manufacturer that you're never going to use, but you don't expect it to come pre-installed with software that logs which apps you use and what websites you visit and sends that data back to your ISP, your internet service provider. But that's exactly what was uncovered when security researcher and EFF client Trevor Eckert did some digging into Carrier IQ, an application that came pre-installed on phones sold by AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile. So this will be back. And then finally, injecting undetectable, undeletable tracking cookies in all of your browsing traffic. AT&T has done this in the past. Verizon has done this in the past, according to the Electronic Freedom Foundation. And they say the number one creepiest thing on our list of privacy invasive practices comes courtesy of Verizon and AT&T. Back in 2014, Verizon Wireless decided it was a good idea to insert super cookies into all of its mobile customers' traffic. Yes, you read that right, as if some Verizon exec thought, inserting tracking headers into all our customers' traffic can't have a downside, can it? Oh, by the way, they didn't bother to explicitly tell their customers ahead of time. But it gets worse, writes EFF. Initially, there was no way for customers to turn this feature off. It didn't matter if you were browsing in incognito or private browsing mode, using a tracker blocker, or even had enabled Do Not Track. Verizon ignored all of it and inserted a unique identifier into your unencrypted outbound traffic anyway. According to the FCC, it wasn't until 2 years after Verizon Wireless first began inserting these things that the company updated its privacy policy to disclose its use of them. So there's a lot of there was a lot at stake in this fight, and that fight was just won by the telecom companies and the Republicans in the House and Senate, who virtually unanimously voted to sell your browsing history, and the Democrats unanimously fought this. Unanimously fought this. Raymond in Villa Park, Illinois. Hey, Raymond, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I want to talk about health care.
Okay.
I remember back when the Clintons were trying to get the one-payer health care.
Yeah. Well, actually, the program that Hillary Clinton came up with back in '93 was not a single-payer program. It was sort of a variation on what we call Obamacare today.
Yes, but the insurance companies got very, very nervous. They come up with these HMOs.
Right.
And
well, the HMOs actually were rolled out during Nixon, but
yeah,
you know.
I know, but but okay, you're right. But I was working. I had good insurance. I didn't have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
It come through our company, but our union. There are several unions in the company I work for, and we're the only ones that didn't have to pay for our health care. So anyway, when I retired, my wife was working for a school district, and she had a lot of health problems, digestive problems, and whatever. And HMO done a lot of stuff, but then they said, well, we spend enough money on you, you don't want to get well, go and see a psychiatrist. And it was a terrible time. Anyway,
wow.
I was on the phone every day with them, and they said, well, we'll send you to, the Mayo Clinic. I said, that's fine. And it went on for 6 weeks. I kept calling and calling. Finally got a letter from them and said, you're not approved or disapproved, but your case is closed.
Yeah.
So anyway, they finally did send her down to the University of Chicago, where they, by accident, found out what was wrong with her. And once she got into Medicare, everything changed. Everything was great. I just can't get over how good it is. And I'm getting my Medicare or my medical stuff from the VA. And
yeah, the VA is socialized medicine. Medicare is single payer, and they both work much better than the for-profit, corporatized, bankster-driven health insurance that most of the rest of us have. And Raymond, great story. Thanks for sharing it with us. I appreciate it. Gabriel in Oakland, California. Hey, Gabriel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, it's Gabrielle.
Oh, Gabrielle, I'm sorry.
First-time caller. So you were talking about billionaires, and when I was in high school a long time ago, they had us do the math. If you had $1 billion and spent $1,000 a day since the birth of Christ, you would still have money.
Right, it would be a million days.
Well, it's
or 10 million.
You still have money. I'm old.
Yeah.
I sat down. I did the math this morning. You still have money. There's no reason for one person to control that kind of wealth.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
I agree. It's why we started the site nobillionaires.com.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I just think that we should have a wealth tax in this country, and I think if somebody can't live on $1 billion, that they probably need a psychiatrist more than they need another $1 billion.
Absolutely. Okay, say 300 million. I'm just throwing a number out, and then at 300, you can still make money, but at $300 million and $1, we tax you in the 99.9 percentile. It's nuts.
Or at least the 74%. I mean, that's what Lyndon Johnson took it down to in 4, I think, or 65. And that's still, as long, actually what research shows is as long as the top tax rate on people who earn more than roughly $3 million a year, as long as that top tax rate is above 50%, you get that behavioral change. You get, where people at the very top don't accumulate mind-boggling, King Midas, kings of old levels of wealth. They get rich, but they don't get so rich that it has a negative consequence on the rest of society. And we really need to roll back the Reagan tax cuts and go back to that top 74% tax rate. And of course, Trump and his Republican buddies are talking about doing the exact opposite. They want to continue lowering tax rates, which is just going to make everything worse. Gabriel, thank you so much for the call. And my apologies for mispronouncing your name. Rich in Cedro Woolley, Washington. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind?
Well, you want to get the single payer on Donald Trump's radar. We know he loves celebrity. I've heard he's a big fan of the show 24. So we need everybody in your audience to write a postcard to the White House that says very simply, ask Kiefer Sutherland about his grandfather.
Right, who is Tommy Douglas, yep.
Exactly. And one other thing, you had a guest last week on your show talking about how you said insurance was a miracle of modern capitalism, which just makes me crazy because insurance is basically everybody pulling their resources for the common good, which is kind of the definition of socialism.
Yeah, except that instead of it being done by the government for everybody, it's being done by a for-profit company that's skimming its little piece off the top. You're absolutely right, Rich. Thanks a lot for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls and the news of the day. Danger Yogi. I'll tell you about that after the break. And welcome back. John, watching Free Speech TV in Champaign, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'm calling about the internet identity theft vote. On Saturday, there was a running poll on the channel Rachel Maddow's on, and the vote come out 96 no to 4, and women 98 to 2. And then you got these the Senate vote is 50 to 48. The Republicans aren't voting for the constituents' choice here.
No, they're not. They're voting for the choice of the companies that are paying their bills.
Do you know what the count was in the House?
I don't, but it was a pretty much party line vote, so it was probably like 220 to whatever.
Well, the Democrats
230 to something.
The Democrats are voting what the people want by that poll,
yep.
And the Republicans aren't.
Yep. Amen. And I didn't realize that Rachel had covered this story. I'm impressed by that. That's great.
No, it's a running vote in the middle of in the afternoon. They ask questions. One of them's on the new judge. About 97 don't want him in there on this running poll. See what I mean?
Yep, I do. John, thanks a lot for the information, and spot on. Laverne in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Laverne, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Tom. First of all, thank you so much for all that you do and all of your reporting. I have learned so much since I have been listening to your show, which has only been about a month now.
Thank you.
But I wanted to comment on your caller, Mary, from St. Louis, who had a question about Nunes saying that he had met with Paul Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to confirm that I did, in fact, hear him say that he had met with Paul Ryan before he went to see Trump.
Really?
And I heard it both on MSNBC and once on CNN.
Well, thank you for that, Laverne. I missed it, and but do we know what that means? I mean, in other words, did Paul Ryan say, "Yeah, go take this to Donald Trump," or did Paul Ryan say, "What? Are you crazy?"
One of the commentators on CNN made the comment that Paul Ryan told him to go talk to Trump. Whether that is factual or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I did myself hear him say that he.
And Paul Ryan is keeping his lips zipped on this. He's not talking about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I could ask a question of something that I'm confused about, Trump is already campaigning for 2020.
That's correct.
Is that a normal process that you've only been in the White House 2 months and you're already campaigning?
No, it's not normal. He launched his campaign for 2020 the afternoon he was inaugurated. And what that does is it allows him to aggregate millions of dollars, which he's doing. He's raising between $15 and $20 million a month on average, and put that money into a campaign fund so that when he goes out and he does his so-called town halls, he doesn't actually invite the public. He only invites donors because it's a campaign event rather than a president event. And thus you see the adoring crowds. And I think this is why he's not throwing out the baseball at the beginning of the season here, because it won't be an adoring crowd. And he doesn't want to be booed, so that's what's going on, and it has never had. President Obama, put together his committee a year and a half before his reelection in 2012. He put it together in late 2010. So this is completely unprecedented, to the best of my knowledge, Laverne. Thanks so much for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Oh, this is amazing. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we have this kind of basic sense of fairness in the United States, and I think even hunters very often have a sense of fairness. And in Alaska, it's been illegal to shoot bears when they're hibernating. Typically, female bears are hibernating with cubs. That's been against the law. But the NRA was like, hey, something we could kill with our guns. And they lobbied the Republicans, who passed a law, Republican members of Congress. They just passed a bill to repeal a set of Alaska's wildlife regulations to favor sport and trophy hunters. The Republicans are now allowing the shooting of hibernating bears with cubs, using airplanes to scout and shoot grizzly bears, and baiting and trapping bears with these brutal steel-jawed leg-hold traps on federally owned land in Alaska. The headline over at Think Progress, the article by Sophie Hesfay, it's actually reprinted from Salon. Danger Yogi, Republicans intentionally make it legal to hunt hibernating animals. This is like as low as it gets. Ray in McHenry, Illinois. Hey, Ray, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. There's a danger in confirming Neil Gorsuch that no one's talked about. He could be the deciding vote that turns our public lands over to the states and ultimately private interest. And his selection was no accident. The Trump presidency is really the third round in the assault on public lands and environmental protection. Round one was the Reagan administration, and two infamous characters from that were James Watt and Ann Gorsuch. Round two was the Bush-Cheney administration, and the fact that their first appointment was Gail Norton was no accident. She was Watt's protege. Now, Trump could have picked a lot of different people to have for conservative judge, but he picks Ann Gorsuch's son. Come on, that's right. Not a coincidence. In 2014, Utah initiated a lawsuit to take control of public lands in their state. I think they hope to get a 5-4 decision, but then Scalia died. And it's at least part of the reason is they refused Garland a hearing, because Hatch and Lee from Utah are both on the Judiciary Committee. Now the Utah, just recently in a newspaper, I'm out here in Utah right now, has pledged to take their fight all the way to the Supreme Court. And I want everybody to think about this. The Trump administration will have to defend our public lands against that lawsuit.
Or they can choose not to.
Yeah, or not. And second of all, Utah is also urging Trump to undo Obama's designation of the Bears Ears National Monument. And if they do, environmental groups are probably going to sue. And one of the things about Gorsuch is he's against environmental groups being part of lawsuits.
Right. Yeah. No, he's Gorsuch is always on. If it's partisan, he's on the side of the Republicans. If it's corporations versus people, he's on the side of the corporations virtually all the time. 38-2, I think, was what Sheldon Whitehouse said. And with regard to on the side of Republicans, it was 6-0. It was 100% of the time. And the thing about the public lands I did not have that backstory, Ray. Thank you for that. But it makes absolutely perfect sense. And, get ready to roll this country back to 1880 because that's the Republican agenda. Ray, thanks a lot for the call. Alicia in Eureka, Montana. Hey, Alicia, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom.
Hey.
To the guy you were talking to who said that the DNC had placed 20 staff in Georgia to assist with the race that's taking place there.
Yeah, for Tom Price's old seat?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here in Montana, we're trying to replace Ryan Zinke.
Right.
And I went to a rally with Rob Quist this past weekend, and I specifically asked the question, what is the DNC doing for you? And he told me that I needed to ask them.
Oh, my.
He indicated to me they're not doing anything for him. And Montana's kind of been teetering on a purple line for quite a while now. This seat is desperate. Is desperately needed.
What's the name of the Democrat who's running for it, Alicia?
Rob Quist.
Quist?
Yes.
Do you know his website, his campaign website?
I do not.
But people could easily plug it into a search engine, presumably Rob Quist in Montana.
Rob Quist for Congress. That's what I would search for. He's his opposition is Greg Giaforte, who tried to run for governor this past fall, who lost. Mm-hmm. He's a millionaire. He's really good friends with Americans for Prosperity and those sort of organizations. And here's Rob Quist with absolutely no federal, assistance from the DNC running against a mobster. And
amazing.
I'm pretty disappointed. Yeah. I just wanted to throw that out there. The DNC is doing absolutely nothing for
the DNC is in a bit of turmoil right now, but they really need to get their act together quickly. I'm with you. Alicia, thank you for the information. And hopefully, a few of our listeners will do something about that. Anna in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Anna, what's on your mind?
Hi, yes. I just got an email from the ACLU. This is in reference to the Florida legislature. There's two bills. This is on undocumented immigrants. It's Senate Bill 120, which reclassifies, if they are charged with something, they increase it up to the next level. For example, if someone had like a 5-year sentence, it would be increased to 15. So that's one. And then the other one is Senate Bill 786, which forces all areas of the state to comply with the ICE detainers. And there's no court orders for these, so they can detain these people for God knows how long.
Right, no more sanctuary cities, in other words.
Exactly. So I'm encouraging all Floridians to contact their state senators and ask them to vote no.
Oh, so this is happening in Florida. I missed that. I thought it was New Mexico. Remarkable.
I'm calling from New Mexico right now, but I know this is an issue.
Right, it's an issue in
Florida. So this is occurring right now in the legislature.
Okay.
So anyway, thanks for listening to me, and I really enjoy your show.
You're welcome. Thank you, Anna, for the information. Dave in Burlington, Illinois. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hoffman Estates. Hey, Tom, this one I got has where Canada has a proposal to build a permanent nuclear waste repository less than a mile from Lake Huron.
You're kidding.
And U.S. Senators Debbie Stabenow, Peters, and Congressman Kildee introduced the resolutions. This is about 2 years old now, but expressing opposition to this, and Peters and that they would like, President Trump and Secretary of State Tillerson to make every effort to prevent the Canadian government from moving forward with this proposal and work to find an alternative solution that does not jeopardize the health of the Great Lakes.
Right. So the Canadian government wants to place a nuclear waste site near Lake Huron. Has it, shades of, what's the mountain in Nevada? Yeah, Yucca Mountain. Yeah. Has it been built? Has any preliminary work been done, or is this just an idea?
Planning stages from them, that they're
in the planning stages right now, Dave?
Proposing, Canadian proposal.
Right.
And the original signers on this would have been, you could ask your frequent guest there, Pocan. Mark Pocan is one of them that was an original.
To fight it?
Co-signer.
That is great.
Klobuchar, Gillibrand, Sherrod Brown.
Oh, that's marvelous. Yeah, I would think any state that is contiguous with the Great Lakes would be pretty flipped out about, a potential Fukushima going off, Yeah, it could be a real mess. Dave, thanks for the call and thanks for the heads up. It's incredible sitting in this seat, listening to some of the smartest people in the country, informing me. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. Yes, it really and truly does. It's not enough to sit around and complain. It's not enough to just vote. And voting is a good thing, and you need to make sure that you're registered to vote, that you can vote, that you do vote. But, you really need to bring a few friends along, right? It's like democracy requires a bunch of us, so, which includes you. Tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.
Welcome back. It is the middle of our fundraising drive, the last week, the final week. Yesterday, we replayed Monday's request, pitch, whatever you call it, because I was at the dentist's office until about 5 minutes before I went on the air. My apologies. Apparently, that was a big mistake because we only raised $4,000 yesterday. We are now $6,000.